This podcast contains detailed plot spoilers, adult language, and mature themes. Listener discretion is advised.
It's a bird. It's a plane. No, it's a podcast of Rare Antiquities, Episode 5. In today's episode, we talk all about the granddaddy of all superheroes, Superman. We are going to spin the Earth backwards all the way back and revisit the classic Christopher Reeve films, and we will also discuss the two reboots, Superman Returns and Man of Steel. Which of these films can still leap tall buildings in a single bound, and which ones will melt from our heat vision? Stay tuned to find out. My name is Harry, and I'll be your host for today's show.
Any more at home like you?
Not really, no.
And I am your co-host, Geoff.
It's amazing that brain can generate enough power to keep those legs moving.
And today, for the first time on a podcast of Rare Antiquities, we bring on our first guest, who is just released from the Phantom Zone, Nathan.
Who is the Simba suit?
So, before we begin today's show, this marks our first podcast to bringing aboard additional guests. So, for any listeners who actually listen to this thing, in our first ever podcast, Geoff and I talked about what influenced us as a kid, what favorite movies were, what we think our best movies were. So, Nathan, do you want to care to tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Well, genre-wise, man, I certainly lean towards, action, science fiction. I mean, I've certainly broadened my horizons as an adult from what I liked as a kid. I think probably one of my first favorite movies that I loved as a kid was probably Ghostbusters. I mean, I have a lot of memories of that as a kid. Same as Big Trouble in Little China was another one. What else? I think later on, the first Tim Burton Batman movie also really got me excited about movies as well, and kind of going from there. Well, I mean, all the Star Wars movies and such, and that's kind of like a brief overview, I suppose.
So in terms of a genre today, do you kind of have a broad liking for anything, or is there a particular genre of film that you enjoy today as an adult? Well,
I mean, I certainly still gravitate towards superhero movies now that we're sort of in this new golden age of superhero movies, but I don't think I have any particular genre that, I'm totally in love with. I will watch all sorts of movies. I also sometimes will watch really bad movies, not B movies, but I kind of get fascinated with big budget bad films and just fascinated about how these movies, how they go wrong. Like, what went wrong when you have like the stars aligned in your favor and yet they just couldn't pull it together.
Oh, that's interesting. That's good. I guess just before we do move on, so you listed some of your favorite movies. How about what you think from your perspective do you think is the best movie that's ever been made?
That has ever been made?
Yeah, from your perspective.
Well, I think a movie like Star Wars certainly fits the bill, because I think that's a movie that I know people that do not like science fiction or really action movies, but they still enjoy the original Star Wars. So I think that, I don't know if it's necessarily a perfect movie that's made, but I mean, for a movie that, it was, not necessarily a big budget, certainly not by today's standards, and not necessarily the greatest writing or acting, it holds up much better than a large portion of movies made from that era. Right. Maybe I'm a little biased.
I think we all are in the end, right? Everybody is. Okay, well, that's good to know. It's good to know. Well, we're glad to have you here today. Before we move on, Geoff, do you want to chime in and ask Nathan anything in particular?
Well, I was fascinated by what you said about your interest in, big movies that were made that don't work, that aren't very good. So what's an example recently, say past 5-10 years of that?
Oh, 5-10 years. There's a movie, it's maybe a little older than 5 or 10 years. Oh, I think a movie like, talking about this before, was G.I. Joe Retaliation. I think, I mean, it's not necessarily like a truly terrible film, but yet, you have a very recognizable franchise name, a huge budget. You've got The Rock, you got Bruce Willis, and yet, it's kind of boring. The action isn't really there, and the movie ends with, they're going to go fight Cobra, and it's Bruce Willis and his fishing pals kind of helping out at the end, and it's just really bizarre. That to me is kind of that's a genre movie, I guess, that is an example. I think another movie that's sort of an example is the movie 88 Minutes, which I watched recently. It's an Al Pacino film, and it's a movie that is kind of terrible, and yet it's a Pacino film. And on the surface, it seems, this seems like kind of a nice, creepy thriller. And then, of course, the concept that, that the movie is supposed to be in real time, 88 minutes, is okay. These are all interesting ideas, and yet the movie completely falls apart. I mean, the whole movie is just ludicrous. As to why that happens,
right.
I don't know. I mean, again, it's one of those things that if it falls apart, and yet you have Pacino, who is a very recognizable actor and can act, albeit always sort of the same way. You kind of go in knowing what you're going to get from Pacino, but yeah, the movie just falls apart, I think.
Oh, that's interesting. That's good. So for today's show, we are going to not do a particular review of any Superman movie. We're going to start with the Christopher Reeve classics, analyze those on a high-level approach, look at the two reboots, Superman Returns and Man of Steel, and then we can all let it flow organically and ask each other's questions, whether we think the reboots have worked. Do we think the franchise is working right now? Where do we think it's headed? Does it look promising? And so forth. So the first thing we usually do on all of our shows is we'll reminisce a little bit about our memories. So Jeff, we'll start with you. Looking back at the original 4 films, the Superman films that Christopher Reeve did, what are your memories and thoughts about those 4?
Well, the first 2 movies kind of predate my lifetime, so I came to these films, much later, mid to late 80s, as Superman 3 and 4 came to the theaters. I don't have a lot of memories of them in my childhood, but there's certainly movies that I remember watching from being a kid, and I'm a huge comic book fan as well. Also, I definitely read the comic books through the 80s and 90s. I think most of my memories of the Christopher Reeve films come, later on in my life as I watched them, more as, as a teenager and as an adult. So what's cool is that I think I've gained more appreciation for maybe not all 4 of them, but definitely for the first one as, as life has gone on, for sure. And, when I look back at them and having rewatched them for the podcast now, it surprises me how good certain aspects of these films are, considering when they were made.
Out of curiosity, and when you went back to watch for this podcast, which ones did you watch?
Yeah, I watched everything kind of out of order because I just thought it might be neat to try that. So I watched Superman, then I watched Superman 3, and then I watched the reboots, and then I went back and watched Superman 2.
So you didn't hit up 4.
You know what? I mean, 4 is just so great, and it's burned in my memory because of its undeniable awesomeness. I felt like I didn't need to revisit it. That's what I was thinking this time.
Okay, and then, yeah, I know we were working in the theater.
I mean, Nuclear Man, come on.
Yeah, I mean, of course, Nuclear Man. What's more to say? Mark Pillow's greatest performance, Oh,
yeah.
So how about you, Nathan?
Also, he had great hair, I should point out.
Yes, he did. The sign of the times. I wish I had that hair right now. I'm losing too much of it. So, Nathan, how about yourself? Going back, looking at these, I think you're a couple years older than Jeff. Do you have any earlier memories of these first 4 films?
Well, yeah, I don't recall the first time I necessarily saw the first 2. As a kid, I mean, they would be on TV every once in a while. They were probably also some of the first movies my dad likely rented, when, you could start renting movies at the movie store, on VHS, and when I always thought 3 was funny when I was a kid, and I have sort of a vague recollection of walking to the movie theater with my mom to go see Superman 4 and thinking that it was totally awesome, but I've always really enjoyed them, and then, I might not watch them for many years, and, like Jeff, I'm kind of surprised how much, I can still enjoy them, even though they are, quite old now.
Yeah, for myself, I watched the original two as they came on TV. The earliest memory I have is I remember Christmas. I don't know if you guys remember this back in the day. They used to have this ABC Sunday night movie special, and it would have that kind of special introduction with all those stars and that kind of high-pitched music, like exciting music. You guys ever remember that?
We didn't get cable, man, when we were kids. So
okay. Sorry.
But they did that for a lot of years because for some reason, or maybe I've just seen it in clips, but I mean, that sounds very familiar for some reason.
Yeah, if you guys are interested after the
But I
podcast.
would associate it with CBC.
CBC, yeah. I mean, I remember it was the ABC. They did it for Superman, Superman 2, Indiana Jones, Star Trek. Those are actually, that's how I got exposed to a lot of these franchise or pop culture movies. Superman being one of them. So watching Superman, Superman 2, and falling in love with it when I saw him on TV. Superman 3, I believe we rented it. Unfortunately, Superman 4 was the only venture for Christopher Reeve for me in the theaters. I remember clearly forcing myself to like it. I remember my sister had to go to the bathroom before the final battle with Nuclear Man, and 2 seconds later when she came back, the movie was done. So that's the kind of that's the memory I have, how quick that movie kind of ended. But I do still enjoy those movies, like you guys said. I think for the most part, the first two hold up. The third one and the fourth one, obviously to a lesser extent. What I really like about it is I like the spirit of the first two movies. It's not just the spirit of fun or a mythological story or it's epic storytelling. I like the spirit of the character of Superman and how he's represented. And you can talk about whether it's a Silver Age or Golden Age Superman that's being shown on the screen there at the time. Obviously, it was in the 70s, so their inspiration was maybe this late 60s, early mid-70s era comic book Superman. I don't know how you classify it. Is that Golden Age or Silver Age, or I'm not sure. But I enjoy that take on Superman, and we can get into it. So when we want to talk about these four, from your perspective, what really worked for you and what didn't? What did they do right? Where did it go wrong? And do they stand up today? Maybe Nathan, you can start first this time.
Well, I think the thing that works, and I'm just talking about the first two, I mean, because I could spend an hour just talking about Superman 3. One thing that really still stands up is the performances, which I sometimes feel with movies from the late 70s, they don't necessarily hold up just because of the way modern films are made. And the stories, I think, it's still the classic Superman story. I don't know if I want to say it's relatable, but it's familiar and it's fun to watch. I don't know if necessarily all the action stands up, but that doesn't really... certainly doesn't bother me when I watch them. But one thing I love is actually late 70s, early 80s special effects. I mean, you certainly don't mistake it for being real, but I kind of like how they look as opposed to now with CG. Sometimes I kind of have, it's like, oh, okay, it looks fake. But when I see some of those late 70s, early 80s special effects, yeah, it's fake, but I just have, a real fondness for them.
Right. So from an acting or practicality standpoint, that's good. How about from a story-wise standpoint, and maybe how about the character of Superman? What's your take on this character from those films? Maybe we can just focus on the first two, or you can talk about all of them, because I think the spirit of the character is roughly the same, regardless of which movie you're talking about. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree that for all the problems that 3 and 4 have, I think Christopher Reeve is still, he's not calling it in the last two. And as far as the representation of the character, I think this is the Silver Age representation. Maybe I'm getting that wrong.
No, I think so too. I just wasn't 100% sure, but that's my take as well.
Yeah, and so I think the performance of Christopher Reeve is really solid in regards to how he portrays the character. And the other thing I really like about his performance is the Clark Kent persona, which I don't really think has actually been captured in any other media, from Smallville to the reboots in the last 10 years here or so. I don't think there's enough appreciation for how because as I was watching the movies for this podcast, I had forgotten how much he not just the fact that he throws the glasses on, but he's actually doing quite a noticeable slump. And I mean, it's silly to think that anyone wouldn't recognize him, but I kind of believe it as I'm watching these films, and I feel that really stands up. I think and all the supporting characters as well like the performances there also stand up.
So aside from Christopher Reeve, then who do you think stands out to you in those movies? Is it more Margot Kidder, Gene Hackman, somebody else? Who did you like?
Well, I certainly liked Margot Kidder in the first two. She got kind of the shaft in 3. 4, I did watch 4 for the podcast, so it's fresh in my mind. Again, she seemed a little tired for the performance. I think that a lot of people kind of now sort of make fun of Margot Kidder because she had a lot of problems in later years and stuff. But I think, again, like she doesn't get enough credit for what she did in the first 2 movies. And also the other thing about at least the first movie, and I sort of forgotten about this, is that there's a real focus on the love story in a way that you don't get in the reboots. Maybe Superman Returns to some degree, but I kind of felt that it actually kind of worked as a love story that could kind of, not that I could personally relate to, but it was interesting to watch.
And I agree, and I was going to point that out a bit later. So just before I get to Jeff's perspective, so Nathan, out of the first 4 Reeve movies, which one is your favorite? And obviously, which one's your least favorite out of the 4?
Oh, wow. Well, I still think the first one is my favorite. I mean, I think it actually goes in direct numerical order. Well, no, that's not quite true. I guess I would probably say 1 is my favorite. 4 is my least favorite, but I think 3 is actually the worst movie. I still enjoy 2, but there are some issues I feel with the story, but that has to do more with the change in tone in that movie because of the change of directors and such. But again, I will sit down and watch that anytime. So.
Yeah, likewise. So let's
But certainly the first one is definitely. I mean, I don't know if it's in my top 10, but I mean, I always recommend watching that movie to people who've never seen it.
Oh yes, it's one of my most favorite movies of all time. I personally I will go on record saying I think it is one of the best movies ever made. It's not the best movie ever made. It's one of the best, but it's me. So Jeff, just going to you now. Same thing as we asked Nathan. What are your thoughts about the first 4? What worked for you? What didn't work for you? And where do you think it started to go wrong, if it went wrong?
Yeah, it probably goes without saying, but the number one thing that works in these movies is Christopher Reeve. There's no question. The guy, as soon as he hits the screen, especially in the suit, like what a striking presence he has. I don't know, destiny or luck, but like a guy, if you could pick a guy to look like Superman on film, at least, from the face, this is the guy for sure. And you know what? It's like I always forget. And then when I see it again, like, wow, man, this guy looks like Superman. His performance, especially in the first one, is absolutely fantastic, both as Superman and as Clark Kent. Nathan touched on it. You notice he's kind of got the slouch going when he's Clark, and he's doing the put on with being a kind of a clumsy, bumbling guy. And it's fantastic. It works so well. It surprises me every time that I watch it. So that works great. I really love the Marlon Brando scenes, the start of the first one on Krypton. I love the Krypton scenes. The look of Krypton is so unique and alien. The crystalline structures, which translate again later to the Fortress of Solitude. I mean, what a simplistic yet wholly original design scheme there. I mean, you don't see that kind of stuff anymore. It's always overly complex because of the CG and the capabilities now with special effects, that we don't get that kind of elegance in set design and special effects anymore. So that's fantastic. And again, same as Nathan, I love the effects of this era. Sure, they're not that fancy, and it's not like they look real, but they have a certain charm and practicality to them that I think it's hard to put your finger on, but it really works for film. And probably the soundtrack goes without saying. right? As soon as it's been a couple years since I watched before the podcast. As soon as I put it in and the music starts going, I mean, the genius of John Williams isn't equaled here, and the music itself. I mean, the movie could have been half as good as it is, and just with the music being as good as it is,
I agree.
It still would have been awesome. I mean, fantastic.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what an opening. Opening credits. I say that's even better than, for me, it's better than Star Wars. It gets me so much more excited than even the Star Wars opening crawl. That's just me.
You know, I don't know if, boy, we could probably do a whole episode on just John Williams' scores.
Yes.
It's definitely up there. There's no question. It's right up there. If, like, for John Williams, all of his scores, Superman and Star Wars are 1 and 2. Which one is 1, which one is 2? I guess you could argue, but definitely no question. As far as where things start to go wrong, I'm kind of so on Margot Kidder. The chemistry is definitely there between the two, and that's very important. I thought she played Lois Lane a little too scatterbrained. I mean, I liked some of the little bits there where she, is asking somebody, how many Zeds are in Catastrophe or something, and it's like none.
Right.
This is funny, but she was a little scatterbrained. I would have liked a stronger presence from our Lois Lane. She's fine. She's certainly capable at it, but I wanted somebody a little bit more formidable, I think, in the role. So,
I think, though,
and in
too,
the second one,
might have been a sign of the times as well. I mean, you have to remember that's, late 70s, and that was probably, for the time, I think that's probably how people would characterize her as formidable.
Yeah,
I would agree.
But, yeah, I think that's a fair point for sure. And, as Harry, as you and I talked about, in our last episode about female characters in Mystery Men, and that movie came out in 1999, and we don't really get, we don't get good female characters so often in movies. So that's a fair point. I found her, especially in Superman 2, I found her a little rough around the edges. Like in Superman 2, she's kind of hanging out. She's got a cigarette hanging out of her mouth, and
yeah, I think you can tell the drug abuse was starting to hit her. She had a completely different look between the first two movies, even though I think some of the scenes were filmed at the same time, even though there was a break. You can even tell with Christopher Reeve, and in some shots he looks bulked up. Some shots he looked a little skinnier because it looked like that there was a break, and then last minute reshoots he wasn't prepared or didn't have enough time to hit the weights again as hard as he used to. So that was something that did strike me in Superman 2. So again, just going back to you, Geoff, where do you think it really starts to go wrong in the original four?
Yeah, in the original, it starts to go wrong. We should probably get into does the first one go wrong? I've got my problems with it, as I've alluded to before. Yes, I think it does go wrong with some of the story beats. I'm not a fan of how the movie resolves itself at the end with the
we'll get into that shortly.
The time travel. We can get into that later. So I don't want to say it goes wrong there, because the whole movie still works. Superman 2 starts to go wrong in the tone. It gets a little bit goofier, even right at the start, and yet parts of it are really serious. So and that is probably a result of the change in directors. So, if you watch the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2, which is very rough and unfinished, it strikes a much more serious tone that I think is more in line with the first one. So it starts to go wrong here. And there's still lots of great pieces about Superman 2, for sure.
But I
think that's where it starts.
Okay, so before then we get into Superman 2, I'll just chime in about the first one, just very quickly. I mean, I agree. I think most people out there in Geekland would agree that Christopher Reeve gives an amazing performance. You guys talked about the differences between the Superman character and the Clark Kent character, how he's slumped, less confident. These are obvious traits that he's doing. But did you guys ever notice that there's a third person that he plays? He actually plays Kal-El.
Yes.
That's when he takes off the glasses, or you could even, in the first one, that's him when he loses his powers on purpose in 2. And then even when he's reflective again, I say in Superman 4, thinking about the nuclear missile crisis, there's a third person there, and that's Kal-El. And that's what I love about Christopher Reeve's performance. He just didn't do Superman and Clark Kent. He did that third personality. And he did it well. And to me, it was striking and obvious. It is subtle, so some people wouldn't notice that, but that's the brilliance of his performance. What do you guys think about that? Do you agree that there's a third character there?
Yeah, if I can answer first, I agree that there's basically four characters here. There's Superman, or sorry, three characters here. There's Superman, and then there's Clark Kent. But you calling the other guy Kal-El, we're using that name to describe perhaps the purest form of this guy, like just how he is when he's alone.
Right.
And maybe it's just semantics, but I think maybe it's important because he's an alien. I don't call that character Kal-El because his Kryptonian persona is a mystery probably even to himself. So I would say that persona, when he's just him, when he's at home maybe by himself, or when he goes, say, to visit his mom, that's Clark Kent. When he's in Metropolis with the glasses and hanging out with Lois Lane, that's like, Clark Kent Prime or something. That's the mask of the mild-mannered reporter. And then there's Superman. So I
agree. I think the way you label it, whether you're talking, my point was there's three striking personalities there. Whether we want to call it, whether we want to call the bumbling guy Clark Kent or not. I agree. The bumbling guy is the mask. How about you, Nathan? Do you see a third guy there?
I'm kind of halfway in between. I'm not sure if I see the third character in the first two. I think, though, or you touched on it there, I really think that there is that third persona for, oddly enough, of all things. We can maybe talk about it in more detail in a bit, but when he's sort of wrestling with some of these issues of what he should do, that felt more like a Kal-El moment when he's wrestling with these ideas, and it's kind of strange in that movie because it's actually a very serious topic. So I guess I'm like a 50% yes on it.
All right, and I agree. We'll try and touch upon very briefly every Christopher Reeve movie if we can. I just want to go quickly back to the first one. So we did talk about Margot Kidder. I agree more with Nathan on this. I did enjoy the character, especially in the first one, and mostly in the second one for the most part. I thought she's a pretty strong character, again, considering the time these movies were made. She struck me a little bit more like a pre-Marion from Raiders of the Lost Ark. She was a little bit more rough around the edges, and I think that strong persona is why the Superman character, or Kal-El, or Clark Kent, whichever one you want to identify, falls for her. Because she's someone who seems to take care of herself, can take care of herself, obviously, except for aircraft accidents where she needs a rescue. Yeah. She seems like someone who is that kind of a strong female personality and a role model for, young girls and women at the time. I thought her acting through the movie was very good. They did have chemistry. And I wanted to touch upon her death scene at the end of the first one. That, to me, when I was young, something that struck me was haunting. The way she was choking on all of that dirt as she was going into the earth, the cracked earth. I thought that was an amazing performance. Is it just me, or what did you guys think of that?
Yeah, I remember, the kid. I remember it's a little disturbing to watch as a child. And actually, I think all the Superman movies have this element where, you have a character that appeals to children, and you have these movies that have these strange dark moments, and a moment like that, suffocating in your car, and it's not, and it's certainly not, it's a moment of suffocation. You see her panic, and of course his reaction to it as well is really jarring, but her death, if you just showed that clip out of context, this is not a kid's movie.
No. It's a dark scene, in my opinion. What do you think, Jeff? What do you think of that particular scene?
Yeah, you're definitely right. It is pretty disturbing. It's not a good way to go. It's one thing, drowning in water obviously is awful, but drowning in dirt there, the way it happened, it's slow and it's painful, and there's agony there, and the tension of that scene. It's awful. There's no question. And I never really thought about it before, but yeah, to throw that into a movie like this, bold choice for sure. It's a shame that it's kind of undercut by what comes next, but
okay, we're going to get into that.
I know.
So Jeff, you tell me, because I know you've been telling me for so long, and I think 99% of the geek world out there will agree with you. They hate the resolution of this movie. Can you tell me why? Let's just get it out on the table, and then I want to know what Nathan has to say.
Sure. So it's not so much the physics of the situation where he flies backwards around the earth and turns back time and then flies forwards around the Earth to speed up time again. I mean, it's kind of silly, but that part doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is when we have these characters who are so powerful. You know, he's a god to us, right? Part of the dramatic interest here is, with all of that power, what are the choices that you choose to make? This is known as the hero's choice. And, you know, in different movies, it's broken down in different ways. Effectively, it comes down to when you have to choose between being the hero or, you know, the greater good of humanity and your personal interests. Which one do you choose? You know, we've seen this in Superman. We've seen this in Batman. We've seen this in Spider-Man. Which one do you choose? And I think that the more powerful your hero, the more interesting this question is. So in this movie, the choice is, who does he save? Does he save Lois Lane, love of his life, and just one person? Or does he choose to save, you know, the entire state of California, you know, somewhere north of 30 to 50 million people? And he's Superman, so he makes the choice to save California. He chooses to save the greater good. Now, he tries to save Lois, and he's too late. And that's a goddamn shame for him. But that was his choice, and I think he has to live with that choice. But he gets to go back in time, which is a bullshit story resolution when, you know, there isn't really any basis in story for it. Like, there's certain things you can't resolve a story on. You can't resolve a story on random chance, and you can't resolve a story on fucking time travel. And he goes back in time, and he gets to have his cake and eat it too. So we don't really know what choice he makes for the hero's choice. I know you can't kill Lois Lane in the first movie of a franchise when he's Superman, but that's a question that's not answered. What choice did he make? He made the one choice, and he's like, shit, I can't live with my choice, so I'm going to go back in time and just make them both, and then we all good. I think it's cheap. I think it's bad storytelling, and I think that does a disservice to this character and to Christopher Reeve's performance. Like Nathan said, you know, his reaction when he finds her lifeless body, you know, having drowned in dirt, it's gone. He gets a do-over. He erases the whole thing. And I am not at all satisfied with that. So that's my opinion.
Okay. Nathan, shoot.
Well, shit, how do I follow up that analysis there?
Well, I mean, do you mostly agree? Do you disagree?
No, I 100% agree. I mean, you know, the physics of it gets made fun of a lot, but just to expand on what Geoff had said, right before that, if you back up, you remember that he makes a promise to that other woman, Miss Tessmacher, to destroy the other missile to save her mother. He promises, he keeps that promise. So it almost didn't even matter that he made that promise a defining characteristic of Superman. You know, I could have lived with him changing the past to save Lois Lane if there was some other consequence. But of course there is not. Although I have a theory that he screwed up the space-time continuum around the Earth because of the way, like, time is all weird in third movie, but we can get into that. But yeah, I agree with Geoff 100%. It is cheap and lazy. And to why they made that decision, I'm really curious to know. I've never actually read the justification for it. And maybe it was just a simpler time. I don't know. But I can't imagine that they decide, oh, we're going to kill Lois Lane. And then there's a studio note that came down and said, okay, well, you can do that, but you have to undo it.
So for you, does that ruin the movie for you?
I don't know if it necessarily ruins the movie. I mean, I know it's coming, you know, and it's kind of sweet moments afterwards, but it's not like I turn it off, you know. I mean, it's still the reaction of him actually doing it. And I also like the scene when, of course, he leaves the car, he's flying, you know, he's angry, flies up into the clouds, and it's, you know, his two fathers are kind of speaking to him about what he should do. I think that's also a really good moment as well. Yeah, but my bigger problem is not so much that he was able to do it, so much as that there was no consequence. You know, maybe they should have killed Jimmy Olsen instead. That really came back.
That's not a consequence. That's a reward.
So you could save Lois, but you know, Jimmy. Oh, he was stuck on the edge of the dam, and but as far as ruining the movie, it's a minor quibble. I think the movie still holds its own, regardless of how it ends.
Okay, so I'll get into my little spiel about this. I'm on the opposite end of how you guys think. I agree it's not the best way to resolve everything, and it does open up the question that if you can do it now, you can do it all the time. There's another recent movie, maybe we can get into in a future podcast, that deals with, coincident resolutions, and then like Star Trek Into Darkness with this Khan blood. Okay, well, now they have this blood, they can cure anybody anytime. There's no tension anymore. The movies are done. And I'm an advocate of that kind of argument, but because there's no depth there. The issue here is, and you touched on this before, Nathan, is this whole movie essentially boils down to a love story. This is Superman, or Kal-El, finding that balance. Like he's saved, he's made those decisions, he's promised. Those decisions to me have not changed simply because he goes back in time. He's still promised Miss Tessmacher. He's still saved all those people first. But now he's going to do something for him. And he's only going to do it this one time. Now you can argue, okay, well, if Lois dies later, is he going to reverse the time again? It's a good question. I don't know. But I bought it here because the love story worked. And they had that chemistry. It's just something that stood out for me. Even as a kid, I believed it. I even thought about this as a kid. Well, I mean, if he could change back the time, change the world back and go back in time all the time, then why am I watching any further sequels? But I bought it because he would only do it this one time for him. It's something that he, who was an alien, who couldn't fit in, finally tapped into some selfishness and said, you know what, I'm doing this for me and for her because I need this. Because he needed to connect with somebody, and that's her. Because that's why I think it works.
Okay, so that's all fine. I don't have a problem with him making the selfish choice here. But then he should have made the selfish choice and saved her and doomed California to a life under the ocean, or the prequel to Escape from L.A.
But as I said,
to getting to do both. I would prefer, I don't care which choice he makes. In fact, I prefer if he makes the selfish choice. I think that's a lot more interesting. But it's not my problem because you're right. He does that for him because it's selfish and she's the woman he loves and the love story works. So make it the choice to save her and sacrifice everybody else. That would have been totally acceptable in this case. But the problem is that he gets to do both. And that's not fair.
But I don't find that a problem. But it's you. I don't find that a problem for me. And I would even go on the record and argue that you can kind of see it even in Superman 2. He realizes that this after it won't work, and the ridiculous, memory erasing kiss and all that stuff. That's why I think, especially after watching that movie, he would never make this choice again. That strengthens this movie even more in that choice because he did it this one time and he can't do it again. His father was right. You can't go around messing with human history because these movies really are one movie.
Yeah, they are. The two are one movie. That is true.
So that's why, to me, it works. So that's why I feel Pandora's box isn't open.
Well, then he gets to close Pandora's box, and that, I mean,
but he's Superman. He can close the Pandora's box, but it still works. But that's just me. I'm the 1%. You're the 99% on this issue. I know that, and I know if I have to argue with another 99 people, I'll still only be the only person who says this. But to me, it works.
Well, that's fair, but how would that be different than any other day?
Oh, that's true. Okay, so let's quickly, for me, I love Superman the movie. It works. It's almost near perfect, even though you guys think the third act has a bad resolution or a very questionable one. I don't think it wrecks the movie at all. I love everything about this movie. I'll use that in my final thoughts. But let's talk about Superman 2. Jeff, in our first podcast, we talked about a movie that kind of I loved as a kid and sort of depreciated. I did watch Superman 2 preparation for this podcast. I think I was a bit harsh. It has depreciated in my eyes, definitely. I can find a lot of problems with this movie. But I still do enjoy it. I still think there's a lot of positives to take away with this movie. But I'll start with you guys. What do you think of Superman 2? What did you think of the three villains and General Zod, the battle, the resolution, the story with Lois and Clark and him giving up his powers, and how this movie is resolved? What did you guys think?
I of course, I really enjoy it. Some of the problems that I do notice with it is that has some real pacing issues that are really strange. And, I think this has to go to the change in directors. And my understanding, when I did a little bit of research, but even though they had filmed a good portion of this, I guess they had actually gone back and reshot stuff that had already been shot because of, who's the director? Richard Lester.
Yeah. Because
of Director Guild rules, if you want to be put on as the director of a movie, you have to have shot over 50%. but since it was already 80% done, he went back and redid a whole bunch of stuff.
Oh, I didn't know that was the specific reason. I thought he just wanted a different take. But no, but that makes more sense. I doubt the Salkinds would have approved it just for a different take.
Well, I mean, it was probably kind of both, because when the Salkinds had like other writers initially, and Richard Donner hated it throughout their script, but then those writers came back for 3, and you know what happened there. But with 2, again, you kind of have like this, it's really noticeable later in 3, but in 2 you have this thing where you have some real serious issues, a continuation of the love story, which kind of works, kind of doesn't. The thing that I think works with the Superman, Lois Lane, Clark Kent love triangle is her ignorance to the situation. That's kind of what makes it work. And
right.
So I kind of feel as though when she knows who he is, that's all gone now. I feel like that doesn't really work. And that was actually kind of the problem with Lois and Clark, New Adventures of Superman. Is when she found out, I mean, that's when, the show's canceled. Like,
oh, yes. I think, yeah, and I think they did the same thing in the comics. She knew, they got married, and they had a run for a few years, and then they had to do the whole reboot of the whole universe, DC universe, or whatever it is.
Oh yeah, and now I think they've gone completely off. We're getting way off topic here, but they've kind of gone off the deep end. I believe she outed him as Superman now in the current iteration of comics, but who knows how long that'll stick. So, anyways, back to Superman 2. There's there's just like weird things that are kind of going on in this movie, but I do like the villains, and I love Terrence Stamp. He acted the shit out of that role, it feels like. And again, it's one of those things that is kind of ingrained itself in popular culture, is before Zod. And other things I really liked was just their, the way they, said Planet Houston. So even those parts had kind of humor.
I love it.
And I think
the whole Planet Houston.
And I think that actually might have been Richard Donner, not Lester, there, because it was too subtle of a joke, I think, for Mr. Slapstick director. But there's a real disappointment in the fact that there's no Marlon Brando. In the theatrical cut, I think in the Richard Donner cut there are. Yeah,
but you have to blame Marlon for that, not Lester.
Oh yeah, exactly. But then you have this weird story where Lois and Clark are investigating. I don't know what a honeymoon scam is exactly. They don't even explain it. So it's supposed to be kind of fun and whatnot. But then you have this scene where Clark Kent gets the shit beaten out of him by some redneck in a diner. And I remember as a kid, I found that, again, just like the death scene of Lois Lane, this is kind of disturbing. It's not like he got kind of, punched in the face a bit. He's been punched through glass, he's in serious pain, no one's helping him out, and this guy walks away laughing.
I like that. I like that scene, though.
Well, no, I do like it. I certainly like it. I kind of don't like the fact that he came back and then, roughed the guy up. But, well, I do and don't. It's kind of weird. This has happened in more than just where Superman can kind of come back and get someone there comeuppance, right? But yeah, I think it, when you really sit and analyze it, it has its problems, but I still find it has a real charm, especially when you watch it right after the first one, and which is what I did. I watched them back to back in one night, and I'm like, oh wow, this actually works much better as like one big giant movie, despite all the goofiness in it.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Jeff?
Oh, geez, where do you start? For sure, Terrence Stamp is top shelf in this movie. What a great bad guy.
Oh, yeah.
He was fantastic. Oh,
absolutely fantastic. Yeah.
Certainly Christopher Reeve is still excellent here. But yeah, the tone, as we've talked about already, the tone's uneven, probably due to the change in directors. I really, the whole battle that plays out, the climax, unfortunately, the technology of the time doesn't do justice to the resolution here, and that's unfortunate.
Now, are you talking about the battle in Metropolis or at the end in the fortress?
More in Metropolis. It's meant to be a big epic battle, right? And
yes.
Unfortunately, they're just not able to do that, and that's too bad. Now, the battle in the fortress, aside from the Saran wrap superpower that he's got with the S, that's this one, right?
Where the cellophane,
yeah. That was a little weird.
Yes. Like, just the cellophane itself is, like, ingrained itself into pop culture.
Yeah.
When someone thinks of cellophane, they think of this scene.
Yeah. It's an odd choice, too. Like, not especially creative. And he basically straight up murders all three of these dudes, doesn't he? And it's not really what he's all about.
He doesn't murder.
It's a soft kill.
There's no kill. Yeah. There's no kill. Okay, we'll get into that.
They're dead.
They're not dead. They're not dead. This is the Fortress of Solitude. So this is the problem now with when we have multiple cuts. So you have the less. So this is my opinion. So there's. Okay, you go.
I'm not done yet. So here's what I really dig about Superman 2. So first, I think we have a much more nuanced version of the hero's choice here, because he chooses to renounce being Superman so he can be with Lois Lane, right? That's his choice here. And I love it. It's fantastic. But he realizes that he can't do this. The world needs Superman, and he can't be selfish. So he has to get his powers back and be Superman as opposed to being Clark Kent that he wants to be and be with Lois Lane. So that's gone. And this is the version of the hero's choice that I enjoy. And he gets a do-over again, but without sort of I guess he still has the hokey, the memory zap thing that he does with her, which is totally stupid too. But
that's like abuse.
Here's my favorite. It was abuse. Well, it is, though, right?
He like mind raped her. This is like an episode out of TNG.
It is an episode of TNG. Yeah, exactly. But here's my favorite part of this movie is, in order to defeat the bad guys, he doesn't rely on his laser beam eyeballs or super speed
or the cellophane.
Or the cellophane. He outsmarts Lex Luthor into tricking General Zod, where he knows Luthor so much. And he's like, okay. He's kind of whispering to him, okay, you got to get him into that chamber there because that's going to take away his powers. And don't be quiet. And it has totally the whole thing set up so that he knows Luthor's going to betray him. That ends with, the three Kryptonians losing their powers.
Oh, what'd you think of him crushing the hand? I love that.
Oh, I loved that when he broke all 3 million bones in that guy's hand. He gave him, just squeezed that guy's hand so hard, he broke both of his ankles at the same time.
Yeah, no. I love it. But the one thing that always stood up for me is like when those bones are breaking, it sounds like I'm playing with bubble wrap,
Yeah, it does, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, like, for me, I still enjoy this movie. I love the beginning, even though it's, Lois Lane and getting into trouble again. I mean, I love how he realizes she's, in trouble. There's an atomic bomb about to go off, and I love that shirt rip in the alley. Like, that's my favorite. When you just want to talk about something as simple as a superhero moment, like, obviously you had that in the first movie, but I love this one in particular. It's so good, even though you have that magical change of the clothes. I mean, I'll let that go because of the limitations of technology at the time. I loved every act of this movie. You wanted a consequence. I love the fact that because he sent the bomb into space, that's what released the 3 Kryptonians. And I loved, actually, their first encounter on the moon with the astronauts. Again, when we're talking about something that's kind of scary and freaky, I mean, as a kid, when that guy gets his suit ripped by Ursa, oh man, I was like, what the fuck's happening? I was like scared shitless as a kid, and then I laughed my ass off as she kicked him and he floats away. But it was like
a slow, cold death.
Yeah, but these are great scenes, and I love the tension building, and I love it when they get onto Planet Houston, and some of the army fight, I still love that army fight, even though I hate the shot with the fire, how he just blows it back. I mean, again, a limitation in the time. So I agree with you, Jeff. There are elements of this movie that do not stand up well, and the effects are just too bad. And it's a shame, because if they had somehow managed to circumvent some of those, a few bad shots, like in the military fight or in the Battle of Metropolis, which I do love. I love most of everything in the Battle of Metropolis until it gets hokey. Like when, I don't mind that the guys use the super breath to push everybody back once they think Superman is dead. But then the jokes start coming out with the guy on the telephone and he keeps talking. There's people coming out of a Kentucky Fried Chicken, and they didn't realize a whole thing. Like people were, this fight was happening outside, all the explosions, and Yeah, the guy on the phone.
Yeah.
Oh, so stupid. The roller skater flying backwards. But
yeah.
but I love the cars flying. I love the damage. I love the fact that, people did want to go get revenge on and take these guys down because they did hurt Superman. But my favorite thing about this scene is in this fight, Superman does want to save people, and then he goes away realizing he can't do any more here. His presence is doing more harm than good. And that will relate to another movie we'll talk about later, and that choice by the director. Yeah, and then in the Fortress, I agree with you, Jeff. I like the fact that he used his brains rather than his brawn. But the problem here now is the powers, the disappearing powers, the frozen Superman powers. I mean, like you can conjure up another Superman made of ice. I mean, all of this kind of stuff is just getting a little hokey, and this is where it starts falling apart, along with the cellophane S. I don't have a problem with those guys, once they lose their powers, falling into the vat, which I assume is like an abyss. They are not dead. They are trapped in the fortress. I cannot contemplate Superman and the Fortress of Solitude and what Jor-El provided him from Krypton has something where it has like these pits that are like bottomless pits, or some final ending where they're going to die. It seems to me it's almost like another Phantom Zone. That's what I believe. I don't think there's never once anywhere where it says they're dead.
No, but there's never once anywhere that says they're in some kind of suspended animation either.
No, but there's an alternate scene where, in the deleted scene, that they're alive. They actually, as you see them being arrested. The Arctic police come and get them.
Oh, the Arctic police. Okay, well, that adds up.
Well, what do you want me to say? It's a problem with the movie, but they're alive.
Yeah, well, but it's not. But it's a deleted scene. It's not actually in the film, so it doesn't count.
Yeah, but then now but then, granted, doesn't count, and I can argue with that in other movies. I didn't see it, so it doesn't count. But I saw it in a deleted scene, so I can at least argue and believe, and just from the spirit of the character, he wouldn't kill these three. So I fail to believe someone would say he murdered these three people.
Well, I mean, I agree. He wouldn't, and that's why I think that I don't believe that he intended to kill them. I don't believe that. It just that's more a failure of the film itself, because you gotta wrap stuff up. You can't have these movies are already long enough as it is, so it's kind of a minor quibble on my point, or from my point of view.
Do you think that makes sense, or do you think these guys are fucked? They're just dead.
I don't know if they're dead. I mean, well, I think that the implication is that they are dead, deleted scene or otherwise. Again, I mean, it's sort of presented in a way where it's ambiguous, and I agree that Superman will not like just straight up murder someone, which of course we're going to get back to that idea I think later on. I think it's kind of presented in such a way that if you don't really know the character, if you don't really think about it, which is I think what they're kind of going for here, is like, well, you just don't think about, okay, they're gone, they're in underneath there, maybe they're in his zoo.
Hey, I like it.
I mean, that's possible. He's down. They're down there with Starro or something.
Crypto. Someone's got to walk Crypto.
Oh, it's like, all right, you guys can't leave. You don't have to go to jail, but you have to stay here.
Well, I even as a kid, I believed that they were not dead. They were just trapped down there. I mean, that's honest.
Well,
I'm telling the truth.
See, that's interesting, because I always perceived it as they were dead. I mean, it's not like a gruesome death necessarily. You don't see it, but it was just the implication.
Okay, so that's interesting. So I guess, Jen, just overall, like, do you still enjoy Superman 2? Does it work? Does it hold up today?
For me, do I still enjoy it? Yes, I do still enjoy watching it for the problems that it has. Still a lot of fun. There's still enough going on here that, yeah, it's still a good watch. Do I recommend it? Absolutely. Does it hold up? That's a tough question, because there's a lot of moving parts there. I mean, obviously it's old. I think this came out in 1980. A lot of Superman 2 is dated, and
the effects are unfortunately a little dated.
The effects are dated. Just the overall look of it is dated.
Sorry, I just want to chime in on one thing why I think the effects don't work here. I mean, there are some Superman effects in this movie that it's obviously a model doll that's stationary and flying. You know what I mean? And in the first one, I mean, obviously they had more budget in the first one, and they had to cut it down because they had so many more effects shots to do on this one as well. And it's a sequel. But because you're not dealing with close-up shots on Reeve, you're not buying it as much. And I think when you do see Reeve a little bit more, and you get some of those flying effects, it still does work when you know it's Reeve. When it's not Reeve or the other actors, and it's far away shots or you get those doll shots, that's when it stops working.
I noticed that too, a lot of the doll shots, and I kind of assumed they were trying to do maybe a little bit more dynamic, faster shot of him flying, because usually when it's Reeves, oftentimes like it feels a little slower, and that's because of the limitations of the time, or maybe they ran out of money.
Maybe. But anyway, so Nathan, what are your final thoughts on Superman 2 here?
Well, yeah, I kind of feel the same as Geoff, where, I personally, I really enjoy it. I do recommend it for anyone who hasn't seen it, but I would recommend, you watch one and then you watch two fairly soon afterwards. Does it hold up? Objectively, maybe not so much, just because of a lot of the pacing issues that are going on here. But, if you're a Superman fan, you can't lose with watching this movie, I think.
Yeah, I agree for the most part. I do still have a lot of fun with this movie. The one thing I do love about this movie is it's extremely quotable. Like, there are so many funny lines in this movie, right?
Yeah.
From Zod's, like, how angry he gets. There's one shot that I always laugh every single time. It's when Superman gets beaten up by the bully and he's in the diner. And this is something that always strikes me, and I love it so much. He sees Zod on TV for the first time, realizes he's there. You see Zod he goes, "Come to me, Superman, if you dare. I defy you." And then he gets so excited, he pushes the president down to sit down, and he shakes the microphone like he can't contain himself. Zod! It's like, I just love it.
I actually really laughed at that. And for all the silly physical gags that go on, there's actually one great gag, and it's early on in the film. Kent, I don't know who he's talking to. He's talking to someone on the Daily Planet. And he tosses his hat behind him, and it lands on the hat rack. That I always laugh at as well.
Yeah. No, and there's a lot of little subtle things like that in the first two movies especially. And I agree. Even though I agree with the most part, I think even though I still like pretty much the bulk of the movie, some of the effects have not dated well in comparison to Superman 1. And I didn't like some of the resolutions, more so in this one versus the reverse the time thing, as we talked about, like the memory blanking kiss, and all of a sudden these ridiculous powers with the cellophane S and the and some of the other ones he had, as we talked about, turning invisible, becoming 3. I don't know if that was a trickery of the Fortress of Solitude, but I don't think so, because the other guys did it. So I
always assumed that even the cellophane was some sort of Fortress of Solitude technology that he had access to in the fortress, because, otherwise, it's just dumb power.
Yeah, but I think at this point it's just starting to become dumb. It's too much what the fuck, taking you out of the movie a little bit more. We're as shocked as those guys are, So, essentially.
What is happening?
What is happening? He defeated me with cellophane? But anyways, I still do recommend it, even though it has somewhat depreciated in my eyes over time. There's still a lot to take away from here, and it's still a very fun movie. Still very highly recommended. Because the podcast is I don't want to take too much time on 3 and 4. So what I'll do is, I just want to ask both of you, out of the two, which one do you enjoy more, and why? So Geoff, you can go first.
I enjoy Superman 3 more. The reason why I enjoy 3 more is I like some of the slower paced scenes where we get, we cut out, we get rid of Jimmy, we get rid of Lois, we get rid of Perry, we get rid of Metropolis for a large part of the film, and we just focus on Clark Kent. We get to go back to his past. We get to meet Lana Lang and get to learn a little bit more about, Clark Kent before he was the bumbling persona. And I really like some of those scenes. I thought it was neat to see, in a movie like this. So that works for me. And the duality that he experiences when, he gets hit with the bogus kryptonite that Richard Pryor makes. He turns into an asshole for part of the movie there.
Yeah, that's a great scene.
Great stuff there, and he's drinking in the bar. I love that.
Oh, that's become like one of the ultimate, most popular gifs. In fact, Nathan, I correct me if I'm wrong. I think I see it as your Skype avatar.
Yes, that is correct. Superman getting his drink on. The best part of that picture, though, is that it's not just him drinking, but it's also all the patrons in the back who don't even really seem to acknowledge that Superman is there.
Except the bartender when he starts blowing away all the expensive 12-year-old scotch, right?
Yeah.
So but I like the fight scene in the junkyard, even though it doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense as to what's physically happening. I don't know, that worked for me because he's fighting against himself, and even though he's fighting against the effects of this what would be crimson kryptonite anywhere else, but this bogus kryptonite. One of the most interesting aspects I find of the genre, the superhero genre, is the duality of personality here. Mm-hmm. And he's fighting against himself here. And I don't know, it really worked. I remember not liking this scene before when I was younger. I thought it was kind of stupid. But when I watched it for the podcast and I watched this scene, it really worked for me. So,
Christopher Reeve, actually, he did such a good job as the bad Superman.
Yeah, he did. He nailed it. Yeah.
He nailed it. He was scary.
He was scary. Yeah. Even when he was scary, we talked about the bar scene, which was great. I loved it when he was really kind of creepily coming on to Lana Lang.
Oh, yeah, that was great. We got a minute.
I always get there in time,
baby. We now know he's a fan of Shatner, so it's good.
Yeah, he is a fan of Shatner. Exactly. Got time for the ladies and time to save the galaxy. So, obviously, the addition of Richard Pryor is very curious here, as he's focused on, and it's a real shame because creates a real weird dynamic there. But to give a long answer to your short question, there, the Superman 3 over Superman 4 for sure.
Nathan, how about yourself?
Yeah, I would say I like 3 or 4. 4 is a little bit boring. I like 3 for, I think, a lot of reasons that Geoff said. I really like Christopher Reeve's performance. But the other reason I like it is because the movie is so insane.
There's no limit here. When you have traffic lights fighting with each other.
And that actually goes to my earlier theory that when he spun the planet around to go back in time, he screwed up space-time continuum, because during that scene when the traffic lights fight and Gus is on that computer, or Richard Pryor's on that computer, Richard Pryor, he's bombed out of his skull, and it's night where he is, but it's daytime there, and people are getting letters not making any sense.
Oh yeah,
that's true.
So, and he's supposed to be this computer genius who seemingly doesn't know anything about computers. And then the other main villain, he wants to control the world's coffee
and oil.
I guess later it's oil as well. And then of course, and then Rich. The movie is so crazy. There's the movie opens with a 15. Geoff, you just watched it recently. Correct me if I'm wrong, but is that opening slapstick scene not 15 minutes long?
Yeah, it's 10 to 15 minutes long.
Yeah, oh my god, yeah.
And most of it does not contain Superman. At one point there's a mom who's slipping on I think hard candy or something like that, and all these other things. But then it gets so, and this is the other thing where it's sort of an extension of 2, where you have a lot of these light scenes and a lot of this humor. In 3, it gets real dark. You just kind of laugh about the scene with Lana Lang in the house, and he's like, oh, I always get there on time. It's creepy. He's a little bit on the rapey side, because he says in his line is something to the effect of, oh, it's unusual to find a good-looking girl like you all by herself.
And better than funny. I've never seen garbage eat garbage before. That would have been a lot.
Yeah.
To her.
But then of course there's the other scene, on the Statue of Liberty or whatever that. I guess that's what it is, but it's in Metropolis, and he's got his junk right in that woman's face, and it's just.
But I agree with you. That's what makes this movie, as you said, batshit crazy. But it's so bad, it's good.
Yeah, and it's like, and again, like I'm thinking, like, is this supposed to be a kids movie? Like at one point, there's like a cocaine joke, and
You even hear him like fornicating with that lady.
Oh yeah.
Right? They're like
Yeah.
doing it in the next room while you're focused on Jabba.
Oh yeah, and then the end, of course, they got the supercomputer that there's like the video game where he's still able to score points. But I like how Richard Pryor, he's able to build the supercomputer and actually watch the guys when they're building it. So like Richard Pryor comes in with all the like napkins and stuff like that. When the guys are building it, the engineers, it's not like they build blueprints from those. They're still using Richard Pryor's napkins. But then
I never noticed
Richard
that.
Pryor says, "Oh, this computer will." It's a little ambiguous. He's like, "Well, this computer will defend itself." And then later, he's shocked that they're trying to use it to kill Superman. But then this allegedly super smart computer, it's not, it uses missiles and then more cellophane against Superman this time. But then attack number 3 is kryptonite. You might think that would be number 1 for a supercomputer.
Yeah.
It was determining what the weaknesses were.
Yeah. And so many other. I could spend an hour talking about Superman 3, but the stuff with Christopher Reeve and the junkyard fight, I love that. And yeah, I'm like Jeff. As a kid, I thought it was kind of dumb, but as an adult, I'm like, yeah, this is actually like a really cool dark scene. I mean, maybe it plays out a little silly, but I think the end part when he chokes out Superman, and then they got the great reveal where he opens up, Clark Kent's, nice white shirt there. He opens up and, you got the S symbol. And it's kind of a great scene.
So I just have some thought that just hit me here because we were talking about maybe there was some cocaine and some other shit that this bad Superman was doing. Do you think this was all in his mind? And then he actually... Yeah, no, not the movie, but that fight. That's why there's nothing there. He's just choking air, finally snaps out of it and goes, "Oh, what a trip. Better get back to it."
To be fair, that fight scene, it does happen directly after he leaves the bar. So maybe he was just, he just tied one on so hard. that was just some alcohol-fueled dream, and then he just woke up in the junkyard. Like, oh, okay, I'm over it now.
Yeah, it's like, Grand Theft Auto. Yeah, you go to that guy who just gives you that doobie, and then you start fighting aliens. Oh, they're coming after me.
I've been that drunk. I don't know about you guys.
I don't know what you're choking there, Jeff, when you're drunk, but I don't want to know. So.
I just want to say, this is before you give us your opinion of the film here, just maybe I like Superman 3, just to shout out that there are location scenes here filmed in our hometown, Calgary of the early 80s. Sure looks a lot different than today. I don't know why they thought it would pass as Metropolis, but...
Do you know my mom saw Christopher Reeve film as Superman in downtown?
I did know that because I think you've told me 100,000 times.
Okay.
Before today. Yeah. So anyway, just wanted to get that out of the way.
I did find it interesting to see the Calgary Tower, I guess, was the C train station, because I'm pretty sure that doesn't exist anymore.
No, but I love the fact that there is, from the first 2 movies and now Superman 3, Canada and Alberta and this city has actually been part of this lore, and I find that personally special.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I don't know if they still use it, and I don't know what the board is called, but there's a government group, like for the Alberta film group or whatever they're called. They actually use a lot of scenes from Superman 3 and part of their sizzle reel when they try to attract Hollywood to produce stuff to come film in Alberta.
I'm sure that reel sizzles now.
Well, I think they only have maybe a couple of the wide shots and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll get into it pretty quick. I agree. On a whole, I like Superman 3 a lot more than Superman 4. I like the message and parts of the story of Superman 4 more than Superman 3. The problem with Superman 3, I do know that the humor gets away from itself, but the problem is we're focusing more on Richard Pryor. It's a Gus Gorman movie, not a Superman movie. And that really comes down to part of the problem. Too much Gus. But I do love the fact that we do get, Clark away from Metropolis and he's bonding with Lana Lang. I loved those scenes in Smallville. And I loved it. I loved the whole thing when he turns bad, as we talked about. It's a great performance. These are great scenes. It's creepy. It's funny. It's a great action scene. One thing I also wanted to point out, the flying effects in this movie are top notch. That is, in my opinion, even though he is on some matte shots, like when he's going over the water or some other places like that. It's a lot of it is he's still really high up in the air. He's not sitting on some box in front of a projector. He's moving and taking off, and some of these effect shots are just, I don't know how they did some of this. Like, if you remember, there was one where even in the junkyard scene, he flies when he wants to crush the good Clark, the evil Superman flies, and you see him fly down, and he goes into the actual machine that will actually initiate the crushing sequence, and it's all one shot. I don't know how they did that, but that's amazing.
That's actually really well shot. Now that I think of it.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many things that stand out here. I loved again Christopher Reeve and the action. The ending is a bit dumb with just the acid, but I do love the light brushing that this is supposed to be Brainiac. Really, that was the focus of what this computer was supposed to be. It's too bad it didn't evolve more. The one thing that I did find interesting, and I wish they elaborated on this more, what I would have done is, and again, we're harking back to something that's creepy for kids. Did you guys freak out when the sister was like turned into the robot and you see all the wires?
Yeah.
Like, another scene that freaked me out when I was a kid.
They borged up that chick. Yeah, when they borged her up, that was creepy. Even when I just watched that now as an adult, I'm like, oof, man, that's messed up.
I remember as a kid being a little scared of that scene. Actually, it is creepy.
Yeah, and it's well done, actually. They don't really, I mean, they hold back gore, but they don't hold back the fighting. It looks good. For a movie of this age, it looks actually really good. But I love the reference. Yeah, she definitely got Borgified. So I guess maybe we know where Star Trek got it from. So, but I wish that what would have happened is maybe would have been more interesting is if Ross was Borgified and he became Brainiac.
So that'd be interesting.
And it would have stayed that way. And Superman
would he still wanted to control coffee?
Hey, man. No, Oil, he's Brainiac. He knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
Do you drink coffee? Then he knows what he's doing. So, but what do you think of that idea?
Well, if they, I mean, they're going to need to do that earlier in the film for that to work.
I was just about to say the same thing, because at that point you're literally like in the last battle, so it'd be kind of a throwaway to make him Brainiac at that point. So yeah, it would have had to have happened.
Unless he got away. They still had a battle and he managed to get away.
Oh, yeah, fair enough.
Or they do some kind of foreshadowing. Just like in Leprechaun, I will not rest until I get my gold. So, So, yeah, but I do agree. It's just, I just don't like how it's resolved with the acid, even though they do foreshadow it beforehand. But it's not as strong as the other two. It does get too humorous, but I do love many of the quotes. I mean, I ask you to kill Superman, and you couldn't even do that one simple thing.
I love that.
So, I mean, there's a lot of
messages. I think messages is don't smoke, kids, because it'll make you a big jerk. Because, I mean, that was, Corman just looked at, okay, tar, all right. And that just makes him, he wasn't really evil. He was just kind of a jerk.
Yeah, that's good. I do love that. I don't know what I'm going to choose, but I'll choose tar. That sounds fun. Yeah. Okay, so let's get into Superman 4. Obviously, most people would agree this is the worst out of the Superman Christopher Reeve movies. It doesn't work. The budget is really bad. It completely trashed, even though they promised a lot more to Christopher Reeve to make this film work. Then they changed canon, changed their minds. And I do feel bad for Reeve in a sense there, but in the end, it's an interesting concept and story about the nuclear missile crisis and Superman actually getting involved with an actual human problem that he can potentially solve. So what do you guys think about just that story concept? And then just based on that, does this movie is there any worth to this movie just based off that concept?
I think it's worth watching. I mean, I actually, this is maybe only the second time I've seen it as an adult. I don't know. I mean, if you're a fan of Superman, it's kind of fun to throw in and have a good laugh, because it does have some serious moments. And, certainly the message, it wasn't even so much the nuclear proliferation that I found interesting. I found it more interesting, the dilemma that Superman has, or really what Kal-El has. I can't remember the dialogue exactly, but when he goes to the Fortress of Solitude and, it's the Kryptonian castle now for some reason instead of his mother as previously. But they say, well, if you keep offering them help, they'll never learn. So you should just let them figure it out for themselves. And that was kind of the gist of it. I thought that was a much more interesting premise. Should he just stand aside, let the world figure it out, or should he do something about it? It certainly has some messages there as to. And the resolution of the movie is I couldn't really tell if he did destroy all the nuclear weapons or not.
Well, I think he did, because they all went into the sun earlier in the movie, right?
He did, but then he gives a speech at the end that seems to sort of indicate, well, the world is still kind of in danger. I guess, yeah, no, maybe you're right. Maybe he did get rid of all of them, but I think it kind of goes to some of the problems that they've had with Superman, and like during World War II, they kind of had weird ways of keeping him out of the war, because if he just goes over and solves it, it's just done. It's not interesting there. So, but I found that kind of interesting, and I don't think I hated it quite as much as I thought I was going to watching it again. You're right, though. It looks cheap. Everyone's looking maybe a little more tired. It's got, all the gags again, even though we don't have the return of Lester. But, there's that weird gag where, Clark Kent and Superman are supposed to be at the same dinner.
Oh, yeah.
And I was thinking, how did he think that was going to work? And it's really strange. People can breathe in space.
That's ridiculous.
Like that.
Yeah.
Even
as a kid, I was like, what the fuck am I watching?
I could almost forgive him talking in space, but when he took that woman, or when Nuclear Man took the woman into space, and we were talking about crazy powers at the end of Superman 2. How about his ability to rebuild the Great Wall of China by just looking at it?
Yeah, I know.
Somehow.
Yeah,
that's push. Well, that's beyond pushing it. Like, that's just flat out ridiculous. So, but I think. Don't want to spend too much time talking about every minor thing in Superman 4, even though I've got about 8 pages of notes about it. I think if you're a fan of Christopher Reeve as Superman, I think it's kind of a fun watch. It's not a good movie.
Oh man, this movie's pretty awful. Unfortunately, the budget or lack thereof really shows here. Lots of half-baked ideas. They're trying to take on something important with the nuclear proliferation message, and I can respect that they took that on. And even the idea of Nuclear Man is okay. Like, they're trying to create an original villain, which is hard to do.
What I want to know is, how in the world did Lex Luthor program that thing to give him clothes? He just cuts out a little piece of fabric and then he's fully dressed.
So he does explain it. He does say the computer will create it. I want to know why Nuclear Man had Lex Luthor's voice.
Yes, he did.
Because something science. That's why, guys. That's why.
Yeah.
You know what I found the most interesting thing to me about this movie, and from when I was a kid, was where the big weight is hanging from one thread of Superman's hair.
Oh yeah, and he's able to cut it.
Yeah, well, yeah, pretty dumb.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say I can't recommend this movie in good conscience to anybody with more than half a brain. It's a real shame that the Christopher Reeve franchise ended on this note here. He deserved better. The franchise deserved better. The character deserved better. And I think, this really shows what, money grubbing losers the producers were getting to this one. They didn't care at this point. It was just another sequel for a money grab. And it's just a damn shame that this movie was made. Maybe there was a couple nuggets here that could have been made into a good movie, but there's nothing here for me.
Yeah, I'm mostly on the same page. When I look at a bad movie, we can all know the reason why the budget was cut, the story, it's just like, you can look at elements of other movies that got their budgets cut. They couldn't realize their full vision. I still do like the message that they're trying to tackle, as you talked about, him stopping a potential nuclear holocaust. He should get involved. Should he not get involved? That interplay, those questions he's asking himself. I enjoyed those scenes. Because to me, this is the Superman I personally want to see, but just done better. And when people say, I need to see Superman fight a supervillain, and I'll get into that maybe when we talk about our final thoughts in the end, I don't need to see that all the time. I'd rather see a good movie of him contemplating saving the world and how much he should get involved. How does he inspire people?
Yeah.
What are the consequences of him getting involved? I think that would be a more interesting story, even though it's not going to sell to young adults and not make money. And that's part of the problem. Even though we get some great stories in the comic books, you could talk about, say, All-Star Superman, for example. Have you guys read that one?
Yes,
so,
I've read that.
How about you, Nathan?
Haven't read it. Watched the cartoon.
You watched the cartoon, so you know the story.
Yes.
So that's another great Superman story that I love, which he's not really there fighting anybody. He's just going to go do the right thing and save everybody anyways. And I love the speeches he gives. And the one thing, what is the most surprising thing out of this movie for me, is I love the line he gives at the UN at the end where he says, I wish you could all see the way I see the world because it's just one world. Something along those lines. It's touching, it's humble, and stays in line with the spirit of who Superman really is. And that's what I take away from this movie. It might be the only thing I take away from this movie, and I still cannot recommend someone watch this, but if you are any Superman fan, find it and watch it just for that one scene, because it's touching, and with all the shit that's going on in the world today, with those refugees, with the atrocities that are happening in the Middle East, that hits home more than ever.
That's a good message. I would say, I would recommend someone go watch it just to see the newspaper headline. Superman says, "Drop dead to kid." For me, it's worth it right there.
Yes. Okay.
In all seriousness, though, I don't know. I think people who are, I kind of disagree with you guys. I think it is bad. I don't think anyone's going to think it's good or come away thinking like, oh, I kind of like that. I think if you're a Superman fan and a Christopher Reeve fan, it's good enough to watch, once if you've never seen it. If you've seen it, you hate it, maybe don't bother. But I would recommend it, just on a number of levels. But maybe it's just me saying, oh, watch a bad movie and make fun of it.
Okay, so I guess let's just, Jeff, I'm pretty sure I know you already talked about what your final thoughts on this. So let's move on to, so unfortunately the Superman Christopher Reeve franchise ended there. So years later, we do get the first of two reboots, Superman Returns. So let's get into this. So my question to you guys is, again, I don't want to get into a plot summary. I just really want to know your initial thoughts, high-level thoughts on this movie. What did you think of story concept? What did you think of the acting? Who was cast? Did they do a good job? Did this work as a sequel / reboot? And also, did it get a fair chance? Because it was dumped to go into another reboot. So what did you guys think? What do you think of all that? I know it's a few questions here. Jeff, how about we start with you?
And you know what? I watched this one, and I've seen Superman Returns a number of times. So watching it in preparation for the podcast, I was surprised. I actually think there's a whole heck of a lot here, and I think it's a goddamn shame some of the concepts that we never got to explore because this was dumped. While it was not a box office failure, it just wasn't enough of a success for Warner Brothers to continue with this franchise. With the casting, Brandon Routh, I dug this guy as Superman and as Clark Kent. Interesting take on the character. Obviously, he's channeling Christopher Reeve somewhat, and that's the idea, right? Bryan Singer did intend this as a spiritual sequel to Superman 1 and 2. So, we are in the same universe, that because the first movies are referenced in indirect ways. So we are getting a different version. What I thought was actually interesting, just talking about the casting still, is Brandon Routh was a I don't want to. It's probably not fair to say less masculine version of Superman, but he, physically he's leaner. The look of the suit is a little more modernized. It's not as masculine as the Christopher Reeve version of the suit. Kate Bosworth was an interesting choice as Lois Lane. I remember her not resonating with me when I first saw the film.
Did she resonate with you now?
When I rewatched it, I actually did like her quite a bit more, and that really surprised me.
Wow, I cannot disagree with you more.
Yeah,
she's horrible.
Yeah,
she's horrible.
Well,
she is the worst casting decision in any of the Superman movies so far, including Man of Steel. Completely miscast.
She's miscast. Yeah, I will agree she is miscast, but I liked her more. It was odd the difference in my memory versus watching it this time. She didn't bother me as much as she did. Kevin Spacey, I also thought made a pretty good Lex Luthor. But I thought he had trouble with the role. He wasn't sure what he was doing. That's the impression I got. He wasn't sure if he was he doing Gene Hackman or was he trying to do his own take? I think he was trying to strike a balance, and I don't think he quite got there, but he was okay. Using the original music, I thought was great. I love when the theme started up. I mean, I was right back into it. I was really enjoying myself. There's lots of little kind of cool bits that we can probably get into here. And again, like I've said, I think there's a few points here that I think is just a damn shame of the missed potential because we weren't carried forward in this universe. But yeah, I thought overall it worked great. I actually really liked James Marsters as Richard White. The choice that Bryan Singer made here, I thought was really interesting. I mean, obviously we've got the conflict, the bit of a love triangle going on here. Lois is in love with this new guy, and they're going to get married, and he's the father of the kid, or at least he believes it, and she's trying to sell that idea. And he's, and obviously we've got Superman coming back into the picture, but he's not played as a jerk or some kind of an asshole or something. He's played very heroically here by James Marsters. This guy is, he's a champ in this movie. I really enjoy it. He knows that his soon-to-be wife is still in love with Superman, but he still sacrifices everything for her, risks everything for her.
He'll take those sloppy seconds.
He will take the sloppy seconds and like it for sure. I really loved, one of my favorite scene in the movie, towards the end where Lois and the kid are trapped in the ship, and the kid goes to open the door, and Richard walks up and opens the door, and she's like, "How did you get here?" And he's like, "I flew." I thought that was a beautifully layered line. So for casting, he was my favorite.
Yeah, he was good. I did enjoy him. I don't know why he left X-Men to do this, but
well, he left X-Men because Bryan Singer left X-Men to do this, and they kill this monkey ass in X3. So that's why to this one, he got no respect in X-Men. Let's face it.
Yeah, he didn't. Yeah.
So that's kind of, I got lots to talk about for Superman Returns, but for my initial impressions, I'll leave it there and turn it over to you guys.
Yes, I mean, like Jeff, I've seen Superman Returns many times, and then rewatching it for this podcast, the one thing that really struck me was that this movie is just way too long. I still like it, but kind of trying to think about it critically. Even though I like the idea that they're trying to do a sort of a homage sequel of sorts, in a way it was kind of also trapped it with some of the problems that I have. I'm with you, Harry. Kate Bosworth, terrible. I mean, I think she's terribly miscast, but I think the role was also terribly written.
I agree. Yeah, she wasn't Lois Lane anymore from the original movies.
No, she wasn't.
In fact, I don't know what the hell she was doing in this movie, because it was not a real, like, she kind of felt like a jilted high school girl in a way. Like, oh, that other guy, he left, you saw him with this dude. I mean, it just was not good. Performance was not there, but I mean, the part was not written well, I don't think. I forget the actor's name, the actor who played the new Perry White. I like him, but he's still trying to be exactly like the Perry White. I'm like, why are we trying to do that? And
Mhm.
then Kevin Spacey, love Kevin Spacey, but again, I agree with Jeff. I don't think he really knew what to do with the role, because sometimes it feels like he's trying to be a little bit jokey like Gene Hackman was, and then go really scary all of a sudden.
Yeah, like
Uh,
he didn't have the charm, and also, I mean, he was smart. He knew what was going on, but he also didn't seem like he had the intelligence that Hackman had. And also, there was a nuance to Hackman's how evil he could be, especially in the first one.
yeah.
There's one line, like I see a lot of people say Hackman's too goofy, he's too hammy. Yeah, it's still a great performance. But the one line that sells me that this is the Lex Luthor that I'm scared shitless of, is he says when Superman tells him in Superman 1, so a warped brain like yours gets kicks out of planning the deaths of innocent people, and he says very plainly and seriously, no, by causing the deaths of innocent people.
Yeah, yeah.
And that is an amazing delivery, an amazing line. And
Yeah,
I
it's
don't
weird
get that.
because it's strange, because I don't think anyone else would have been able to deliver that line in a way. I mean, I think if you gave that line to Kevin Spacey, he would have been soft-spoken the first part and then yelled the second part in Superman's face.
But that's what he would.
And-
Yeah, he did that to Lois, right? That's what he was
Well,
doing.
yeah. Well, yeah. And I mean, and Gene Hackman's character, I mean, the way the character is written too is that Lex Luthor at the time was, not quite that was still the era of he was the evil scientist. And in Superman Returns, he's like, well, he starts off as an evil grifter, and then he wants the land thing again, which it's kind of strange that we're retreading that. But Brandon Ruth, I really like Brandon Ruth, especially in the things he's done after Superman Returns. I really thought that after the sequel for Superman Returns, like when that wasn't going to materialize, I'm like, oh, this guy's acting career is done. And I've really grown to be a fan of his. But I really did like him in this movie, and I kind of liked his take. And obviously he was picked for, not 100% his looks, but I mean that probably strongly influenced his casting in this. Overall, I like Superman Returns. I think it's just too long, and I think the devotion that they have to the Richard Donner films may have hurt them a little bit. And also about Marsters there, the thing was that I don't like him, even though he was actually I like him as an actor, and I do like the characterization. But I didn't like him there. It felt odd, but he was actually a very necessary component of the story.
Mhm.
It's kind of a weird. When I watch it, I feel weird about it because I like it and I don't like it.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I have similar reservations for Superman Returns as you guys said. It's interesting how Superman Returns is kind of a reboot, remake, or homage of when you say of Superman the movie, and Man of Steel is kind of, even though it's kind of a hybrid, it's dealing with Zod, which is Superman 2. Going back to this movie, the problem here is that it's a beat for beat remake. I mean, a replica of Superman the movie. I made a whole list. I'm just going to list a couple of these things here. It starts off with Krypton blowing up. Luthor has another Miss Tessmacher. Miss Tessmacher's character has a heart of gold and does something nice at the end. Luthor going through a library looking where he can find kryptonite. He's on the Kent farm. When he sees Jimmy mixes up his name. Again, he saves Lois from an aircraft accident, says the same line. She faints again. Clark getting stuck in a turnstile, saying the word swell, reference to Addis Ababa, still have another flying sequence, Lex dealing with the land, and then the cracks in the earth, and it is a complete remake, beat for beat. There's nothing new here, and that's part of the problem, except with the Super Kid. That's the only thing.
And when I was watching it again for this podcast, I had, the fact that they spend so much time trying to stay devoted to the original movie, I think kind of holds the story back. It's funny that you mentioned all those beat for beat things. I'm going to bring that up when we talk about Man of Steel.
No, but I do want to say one thing. There is one element of Lex. He says a line in here that's well done by Spacey. He says, "Gods are selfish beings who fly around in little red capes who don't share their power with mankind." This is, even though I can see Hackman saying it, but this is now a slightly more modernized Lex Luthor that fans have been kind of clamming for. You know, the power, the businessman Lex Luthor, who's, I don't know, becomes president in the comics or whatnot. He's not a scientist anymore. He's more of the powerful businessman who manipulates and wants that power. So I did like that line, and that's the only line that I like that Kevin Spacey said in this movie. I liked Brandon Routh. Is it Routh or Ruth?
I don't know. We'd have to ask him when we have him as a guest star on the podcast.
Well, I'm going to go Brandon Routh because that's what I've heard. I
thought I heard it as Ruth.
Okay, so Brandon Routh. I did like him. I feel sorry for the guy. I did like the fact, and I really appreciate that he didn't just go out and copy Christopher Reeve. There were elements of Christopher Reeve in his performance, but he still did something, I wouldn't say unique, but still something of his own. And it's a shame. I still felt that the Superman that I like, the spirit of who Superman really is still evident in this character we see here. Even though I know it's a remake or a sequel, still in the same universe. So that was kind of the point. But I still see it here, and it's a shame we didn't get to see more of him doing something different. I did like he wasn't a bumbling fool as Clark Kent. So that was a good thing. But I do want to touch on two things that I did notice in this movie that I did like. When he arrives back at Earth, you see him at home in this farm as he's recuperating from his trip. He's flipping through the TV. He has a very angry look on his face as he's seeing all the violence and chaos all over the news. It's reflective of modern times, and then again you see him when he talks to Lois when they're up in their flying sequence, and he says they're talking about the world doesn't need a Superman, and does the world need a Superman? So these elements I liked, and he says, you're saying the world doesn't need a savior, but when I'm up here, that's all I hear. People are crying for one. So these are, again, elements of a Superman movie that I wish, instead of remaking Superman the movie, they would have explored this here. Or it's too bad we didn't get a sequel that have explored those facets a little bit more. And that's a shame. That's something I just wanted to point out.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. That aspect, and along with a few others, I think is a real shame we didn't get to explore in a sequel to this film, because you're right, they raised some questions here that you can tell they were going to carry forward in this new franchise, and they never got the chance. And while I know that I would have noted this the first time I saw it, and in subsequent viewings when I was sitting down writing notes on this for the podcast, I mean, I starred a couple of points here. I'm like, it's a goddamn shame, because this is a really good question that they raised here, and they just did not get the chance to really explore this topic. But
they did.
Right.
But they did get the chance. This movie was their chance, and they didn't explore. They just wanted a repeat, and that's the problem here.
You're right. I mean, Bryan Singer, it's weird to say, he had too much reverence for the source material here, for the Christopher Reeve, Richard Donner movies. He wanted to set this in that universe too much, and that hurt it. I mean, it's great because there's elements of that. I mean, that would have been great in a new franchise. We could have carried the spirit of the original movies forward into the 21st century, and that would have been great. And I think they could have done it, because I think this movie works in a lot of ways, and they didn't get the chance. The miscasting of Kate Bosworth and other aspects that don't quite work, just because they're calling back too much to to Superman and Superman 2. But man, it's a shame. It's a real shame that they didn't get the chance.
Yes, and I agree. But before we move on from Superman Returns, we can't do a proper analysis without mentioning the child, the super kid. So what are your thoughts on that development? How about you, Nathan? What do you think about that?
Well, I think when I initially saw the movie, I didn't really know what to think of it, and I think I disliked it initially, but now I appreciate that this was completely new territory that they were going to explore. It's not really explored in the comic books other than, the occasional Elseworlds comic book. I appreciate that they were going to try a new take, and I think that could have been their chance if they had a sequel. That would have been some very new and interesting territory to explore. My impression, though, too, is that a lot of people don't like the kid or the idea that it represents, and I'm not really clear on why people don't like it. Maybe because it's different, but different can be good. And for a movie that is, as you said, Harry, almost like a complete remake of the first movie. I mean, I think it's an interesting idea.
I absolutely love this idea of the kid. First of all, just in the logistics of the film, I loved how they played it where, he's a mess of a human being, obviously because he's a hybrid of an alien and a human. So he's got the asthma thing. And there's a scene where Lois is like, did you take this? Did you take this? Did you take this? So, he's struggling with just being, half human, half Kryptonian. I thought that was those great details. Oh man, I think it's new territory. There's so many things that they could do here in a sequel. I really liked at the end when Superman is totally creeping on Lois Lane and he's in the kid's room and he gives the Marlon Brando speech, right, from Superman to the kid. I love that. There's that scene where after the kid does the Wile E. Coyote Roadrunner piano on the bad guy, and the bad guys report back to Lex Luthor, you got hit with the piano, and Luthor, right, boom, he knows.
Yeah.
Right there. Exactly who this kid is.
Well, he even knew kind of before.
Well, he suspected before, but right there, he knew exactly. He's like, where are they, right? So
that's also a really great scene for Kevin Spacey because
yes,
because there's no line. It's just the look in his face, and it's priceless.
Yeah, it is priceless. And so I thought that that was really neat. Nobody's dared to present the idea of Superman and his offspring with Lois Lane in what we would say as canon, right? As Nathan said, we've seen some of this stuff in some Elseworlds comic books, some alternate realities. Usually Lois just dies before she can give birth to a Kryptonian baby. But we've never had anybody who was like, nope, we're doing this. We're going forward and we're doing this. And Bryan Singer had the balls to do it. And I'm really disappointed that we don't get to explore this further. Thought it was great. Like I said 100 times already today. It's a goddamn shame.
Okay, so that's thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking. I'm considerate of you.
Yeah, but no problem. I'm going to tell you what I think of this. Wrong. I mean, I am all for new ideas and takes. What scares me here is Singer's premise of doing this seemed to me about getting Routh that line at the end that the circle is complete, the father becomes the son, and the son becomes the father. So again, we are does it make sense in terms of life? For people who are parents, they're once babies, then they have their own babies, and then, when you get old, your kids take care of you in a sense. These are elements and tropes that are true in reality.
Sorry, I don't want to cut you off here, dude, but it's like the son becomes the father, but the father becomes the son, like the sun in the sky.
Well,
like
you
God,
can look at it.
right?
You can look at it both ways, though.
No, but that's how the line is meant. Like the sun, right, to Kal-El, to Superman.
Yeah,
like
you are the light in my eyes. Yeah,
right. But the sun, like Jor-El is the sun in the sky. SUN to Kal-El, to Superman, right? So now it passes to his son. So, I see what you're saying where, Bryan Singer is trying to bring it full circle, but it's not so much full circle as the next generation passing the torch.
Oh, did somebody hang up here? Nathan, are you still here?
No, I'm still here.
You're still there. Okay, giddy up.
Right. But I will be back in 30 seconds.
The thing is here, Jeff, is where I disagree is this is something that's played in other movies, and it scares the hell out of me. Not that I don't want Superman to have a family,
Yeah.
but where would the story go from there? I can tell you where the story would go from there in the future. He's either going to fight alongside of him, and then it's not going to be as interesting of a story. You're going to get Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull. You're going to get A Good Day to Die Hard. You're going to get movies that just downplay it and focus on the wrong aspects of family. Because now the son's tagging along for the adventure with the papa.
Are you saying you didn't like A Good Day to Die Hard?
Do you understand what I mean? Is where are you going to take it from here? Unless Superman's going to take a back seat and he's going to become Mr. Miyagi and this is Daniel's son who's going to now take up the red cape and boots. I don't see where you're really going to go with this story, except it's just another character in the future that would actually get into trouble and become a hostage that Superman has to rescue, and you're going to handcuff future movies. So I don't like that. There's another problem with the Super Kid here. Now, what's Bryan Singer going off of? The Lester version? Because, correct me if I'm wrong, Superman lost his powers, then fucked Lois Lane.
Well, it's still Kryptonian DNA, though.
He lost his powers. He's going to be a mortal man.
Suppressed. It didn't turn him into a human being. It didn't change his DNA.
So this kid should have been suppressed too. This kid's like, what, 10 years old and he's pushing pianos that hard? Give me a break.
Well, when Clark Kent when Kal-El came to Earth as a 4-year-old, he was lifting a car.
Yeah, but his powers were not suppressed. His powers were not suppressed.
What does that have to do with his DNA? He's still Kryptonian, right?
Man, it's just like an X-ray. You go through that shit, it fucks up your sperm, man. That's not super sperm anymore. Now you're going to get into that debate where it's like, if it's super sperm, it's blasting through Lois Lane. I mean, I don't know if you want to get into this conversation now. Well, that sperm is neutralized. And this is the crux. This is worse than, if you're going to argue that this works, this is worse than the turning back in time. I'm sorry.
I accept your apology, but you're wrong.
Nathan, what do you think? I know you skipped out a bit there.
It's funny. Years ago, when in the comic book, when they introduced the son of Bruce Wayne, Damian Wayne, I thought this is a terrible idea. But it actually kind of worked out, because he was very dark and borderline evil character. So to say that there's nowhere to go with this kid, I don't think you give smart writers enough credit. I mean, I agree that yes, you're just giving Superman yet another person has to try and save at the end of the day. But I mean, and if they had a sequel, then yeah, he's only going to be a couple years old or so. But down the line, I think that they probably have enough to work with to make things to make them different enough. One of the other things certainly with Richard Donner films is the Superman opposes his Kryptonian father at the end, and so you could almost have this kid oppose Superman in some way, thinking that I'm doing the greater good. And I'm not a writer, so I mean, all the thoughts are not formed in my head, but I think it has some possibilities. It could definitely go the other way, where it's absolutely terrible. But I appreciate the fact that they are trying something different. In a movie where they are borrowing everything from the Richard Donner films, it was kind of refreshing that they have enough forethought to say, okay, we need to do something different for the next one. And that's the part I like. As to whether or not the kid could actually work, we'll never know.
Yeah, and we'll never know. But yeah, it just scares the hell out of me because I have absolutely no faith in Hollywood that, you're replicating a movie beat for beat, and now you're introducing this, and the next movie is going to be Superman 2, and instead of Lois Lane being ripped apart at the end or threatened to be ripped apart, it's going to be the son. Oh, but the son will then turn around and break the guy's hand. Or I don't know. You know what I mean? It's just, it scares me when I see father-son superhero action movies or superhero movies, because I haven't seen one that really worked yet. You could argue Last Crusade worked. Elements of it did, but it also dumbed down elements of Indiana Jones as well that I didn't like. Anyways, that's just me.
I think that's a fair criticism for sure. And I agree with your fears that, that they would kind of take this and like, oh, we'll make him Superboy now.
Yeah.
Right. Or something ridiculous like that. And yeah, it could go, I think it could go either way, but I think that there is possibilities there. But I mean, the point is moot because I mean, they will never explore this.
Correct.
And in the upcoming DC cinematic universe.
That's true. Okay, so final thoughts on Superman Returns. So obviously, you guys, I think we all agree that it didn't get a fair shake, and it's a shame we didn't see a sequel or a continuation of this universe. I mainly say that just because of the spirit of the character, not from what I see here. So the question I have for you is just based on this movie and this movie alone, do you recommend it?
Yeah, I recommend this one. I agree with you, Harry. The spirit of the character is here. He's a little bit broody here for Superman, but I think that this is still the Superman that we know and love. I think that there's some really interesting questions here that are raised. I think are maybe, if not provocative, at least interesting to contemplate. And aside from Superman's tendency to creep on Lois Lane, which is a little unsettling, to be honest with you, I think there's a lot of cool stuff here. So yeah, this is a recommendation for me. Absolutely.
Yeah, I absolutely recommend it. Yeah, kind of like what Geoff was saying was that some of the themes are definitely there. I don't necessarily mind the fact that he's a little bit more on the broody side. I mean, I guess you can kind of explain it away as, him kind of returning at sort of this, these mixed feelings he has. Yeah, but I absolutely recommend it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, in a sense, I agree with you, Nathan. I don't mind that there are elements that he is slightly broody. I understand the argument that many fans have that he's just stalking and using his X-ray vision to invade privacy and stuff. But we're dealing with him and the love of his life, so he's not doing that to a lot of people. He's just doing.
So it's
that
okay to stalk as long as it's your former girlfriend. Okay.
Well, I mean, I think he just needed to know where he stands.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah. Because stalkers usually don't worry about the girlfriend. They just stalk random people. Yeah.
Anyways, I can let that go. It's not a crux for me. What is a crux is the fact that this, to me, is, as I mentioned already, it's too familiar. The story beats are all the same, even though there are elements that are slightly different. And I'm not a fan of the story direction with the kid. The repetition and this story beat is what killed this movie in its tracks right here. I agree with you. I think it still made enough money to warrant a sequel. But anyways, this universe dies here, unfortunately, because I do like the spirit of the character. But I cannot give this movie a recommendation from me. No. It just fails because it just repeats everything that's come before. And it was done better in the other movie. So when I watch this movie, I just say I want to stop watching it and I want to pop in Superman the movie. And that's the problem I have here, essentially. So now because the podcast is getting longer, so let's move on to Man of Steel. I think we're going to have some interesting discussions here. So obviously this movie is pretty recent, so we really don't need to talk about memories of this movie or anything like that. I'll just let you guys tell me what your thoughts of this movie are, just to start the conversation. So Nathan, how about you start us off here about Man of Steel?
Well, I love it. I love Man of Steel. Even though it has, I mean, I could talk a lot about problems with Man of Steel, but I really enjoy it, despite the fact that, again, we got a broody Superman. It's dark, and I know I'm jumping right to the end, but it's a pretty gruesome kill at the end. But when I was rewatching it, I actually at one point thought, you could almost recut Superman 1 and 2 and make a very similar movie to Man of Steel. You start on Krypton, and there's Jor-El having a disagreement with the council, and then there's Zod. Then he imprisons on the Phantom Zone, and then they send Kal-El to Earth, and everything down to like in a small town, and there's the army and fighting the Kryptonians. Like there's a lot of very similar things, and I thought that was very odd given Zack Snyder's comments that he he was shocked that people hung on to Christopher Reeve so much. And I love some of the action, and I really like Amy Adams as Lois Lane. I have a bit of a soft spot for Amy Adams.
Is that a soft spot or a hard spot?
Well, hey, man. I maybe both.
Come on, man, it's a family show. Come on.
About a family movie, no less. Yeah, I recognize a lot of problems that people have with Man of Steel and the darker tone. He has none of the real charm that Christopher Reeve or even Brandon Routh had as the character. But even still, like, there are some things that I remember from the comic book in the 90s that were really present in this movie, where he was like a stronger, slightly darker character who was kind of a no-nonsense type of Superman, which was a little different than Christopher Reeve. I loved Michael Shannon as Zod. I was kind of curious, though, as to why, and I want to know your guys' thoughts on this. So Zack Snyder said he didn't really want to pay too much tribute to the Christopher Reeve. They want to make a clean break. And yet they have two Kryptonians that are almost like a complete ripoff of Ursa and Non.
Exactly. Yeah, they are.
It's a really odd choice, because there's a great homage that I really loved with Jor-El showing, Kal-El, the whole story of Krypton, and there's kind of the one shot of, when he's describing how, we shot into space, and it kind of looks similar to the spacecraft from the first movie. That was a cool homage. But then to have two Kryptonians that are not Ursa and Non, but they kind of are, but they're not. You can't fault the action sequences. I think the action sequences work. And everyone really complains about, this is another thing I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts on, is the scene at the end when they total Metropolis. I didn't have a problem with that. If anyone, for people who've, unless you're a professional fighter, if you've been in a fight, you're not really in control of the situation. That was sometimes the criticism there, that, Superman should have taken it out of the city. I know I'm kind of delving into specifics now, but I thought, I don't know, I can kind of live with that. The movie, to me, works despite the fact that it is almost a complete 180 departure of the tone of every Superman we've seen so far. I don't know. It's certainly not my favorite Superman movie, but I really like it. I think I may actually like it a little bit more than Superman Returns, even.
Interesting.
Actually, maybe a lot more now that I think of it. Yeah, I'm changing my answer. I like it a lot more than Superman Returns.
Okay, that's good. So, Jeff, yourself.
Yeah, I'm a fan of Man of Steel. I think there's a lot of interesting things going on here. Just to go through high level here, I really enjoyed the sci-fi look of Krypton at the start. There's some things that kind of bug me that don't make a whole heck of a lot of sense there, but the look is pretty neat. It's pretty similar to the opening of the original Superman Christopher Reeve movies there. The Zod Rebellion got some similarities there, but I think that's kind of built into the mythology now, so it's hard to not do that now. One thing that really struck me, I really love the physicality of Henry Cavill. This guy's a fucking beast of a human being.
He's a beast, but that suit, it makes him a lot monster, bigger. Man.
Well, he's big. I like the fact that, he's not waxing his chest either, he's just a big hairy dude. I thought it was kind of neat. Like people kind of, I don't know if it's been talked about. I like the addition of the beard in certain scenes. I thought that added it grounded him a little bit. Thought it was a good choice. He's the most masculine version I think we've seen of Superman so far, of Clark Kent, and I like that quite a bit. So I think that's pretty cool. I enjoy it. I mean, he's definitely a different take on the character right now. The earnestness, the innocence of what we've seen before, the Christopher Reeve and the Brandon Routh takes on the character is not here. I think we get a more emotional version of Clark Kent, of Superman. For better or worse, it's different, and I like it. I like seeing a different version of this character that we all know really well. I mean, I'm a fan of the comic books. I've read, lots and lots of issues of the Superman books. I've seen all the movies. I like a slightly different take on the character. Zack Snyder's, you can criticize the guy. He's not a great filmmaker, but I think he's a good filmmaker. Amy Adams, yeah, I liked her as Lois Lane. She didn't blow me away. My favorite part of the movie, I mean, there's lots that I really like about Man of Steel. Kevin Costner as Jonathan Kent really worked for me. And here's what I really loved. Okay, and I know you guys know the scene. So, in the movie, chronologically, Clark Kent's met Lois in the cemetery, and he's telling her the story, or at least that's what we're led to believe there in flashbacks about his father. So they're driving along, and they come across the tornado, and they stop the traffic jam because there's a giant wind tunnel of death coming for everybody. And he takes shelter with his mom under the overpass, and his father is rescuing the lady, rescues the dog, saves a kid, gets his leg caught, and his leg's broken. He can't make it back. So Clark needs to make the choice. He's like, okay, I got to save him, and I'm going to reveal myself. And the look on his face says he's going to go and do it. And then his father puts his hand up, gives a little shake of his head. And so Clark needs to make the choice, right? Save him, save his father, or be revealed. And his father says no. So then the choice is, does he trust his father or not? Does he save him? And he chooses to trust his father and let him die. Yeah. I love the impact that they put on his death. Like in Superman the movie, he drops dead of a heart attack. And it's obviously impactful for him because now he's lost both of his fathers, right? But here...
Also, and I agree, this is a powerful moment in this film. One of the better moments of the film in Man of Steel. But even in the first one, the point there is that even though he had all those powers, he still can't save a human from dying of natural causes.
You're right, and that's one of the not problems, but that's one of the interesting features of the Christopher Reeve movies is with all of his power, there really is only so much he can do, even though he can fucking travel through time. Here, it's the same problem. There's only so much he can do, but here he has to make the choice. And man, I love that they did that. I thought that was really interesting. They have never done that before, as far as I know, in the books. So,
see, I'm gonna counter you on this. You're interpreting it as this was his choice, but
it was his choice, though.
He did. In a sense, yes. But let's look at it from a child abuse standpoint. His father
interesting.
This got dark. It was already dark. It's like, okay, well, Dad's dead. Okay,
that escalated quickly.
No, but let me just think of just giving you a different viewpoint. I 100% agree it's a powerful moment in the film, and I do like it. I'm glad it's a different take. But I don't necessarily 100% agree with your interpretation that he was sitting there with the choice. His father made the choice for him. His father has been telling him, even though he's been kind of saying it in an open way, eventually you're going to have to make a choice. Eventually you're going to have to make a choice of what kind of man you're going to be. But he's also shown that you cannot reveal yourself. You are going to be a farmer. You are going to do this.
No,
and then he also says, he puts up his hand and says, no, you're not coming. So out of respect for his father, he's trusting his father. You're right. I'm just arguing with you that he's not necessarily making a choice there. He feels maybe he doesn't have a choice. And that's part of the paranoia here, is he feels the world isn't ready, and it's a valid question.
Yes, right. Well, and that is a valid question. Either way you cut it, I think there's really interesting questions to be asked here. I think, because his father has already said, it's like, you're going to change the world, and you need to decide what kind of man you're going to be. So I don't think that Jonathan Kent is assuming that, this alien from another world who can, shoot lasers out of his eyes is going to be a farmer for the rest of his life. He knows he's going to change the world.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Right? I'll agree with you, because the last shot of the movie says what you're saying, which is a great shot. But I'm just saying, even though I think Jonathan knew he was going to change the world for the better, he was so scared, and the mom was scared too. She admitted it later, that the world isn't ready and he wouldn't be ready. And they're also not ready to let go of their son.
Yeah, and I think that's more what it was, is they weren't ready to let go, because as soon as he reveals himself, they think they're going to lose him to, whatever is going to come next. So for sure. A couple other points on the film. Henry Cavill, while I liked his take on Clark Kent as Superman, he doesn't have that earnestness of Christopher Reeve, but he's still very striking. I like the physicality that he brings to the role. I don't think he gets a lot of opportunity to really explore the duality here, because that's not part of the story, which I kind of liked, actually. We don't have to play the game of, Lois can't tell who he is and that kind of stuff. We just get rid of that stuff. We've done that before, and I like that we don't need to revisit that.
Loved that part
I like
Which part?
I thought that was one of the better decisions of this movie. And I don't know. I think maybe, Jeff, I was talking to you before Man of Steel had come out. And I had sort of predicted that, mostly just based on what we saw in the trailer, that there just would be no Clark Kent. Now, obviously, ultimately I was wrong, because they do introduce him at the end. But I agree that it was a good choice just to do away with that. And it's like, okay, she knows who he is right from the start.
Yeah, and I remember you saying that, and I agree, and I think you probably read like an advance script in order to make that prediction, but...
Okay. That was all from the trailer. It was all from the trailer.
Sure.
I don't want to wrap up my thoughts here, but just the sort of my initial impressions here. This goes for Man of Steel and Superman Returns. I really dislike the Christian imagery here, the cross, the crucifixion scene. This happens in
the on your nose imagery, you mean?
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't see any. What are you talking about?
What are you talking about? It's the guy falling with his arms hanging out to the sides.
Where he is literally Jesus Christ, or the scene where he's having a little speech in front of the stained glass window with Jesus Christ. Oh God!
Who was also wearing red and blue, I believe, or something.
It's really lazy filmmaking, honestly. I know. I mean, come on. We all know that this is part of the allegory here, but it's lazy. I mean, in Superman Returns, we didn't really talk about this. There's a couple of images of Atlas. Where he's got the world on his shoulders. I kind of prefer that to the Jesus stuff, where he's got his arms are out to the sides. Like, come on, give me a break. Like, they didn't resort to that shit in the Christopher Reeve movies.
They did, but it was less. It was less in your face. It was just Marlon Brando's when Superman was first revealed in his space school scene, saying, "Because of their compassion for good, I have sent them you, my only son." So that's
fine.
And that's perfect. Fine. That's all I need. I don't need him in images of the cross.
Totally agree with you there. That's what we need. And I love that line from Marlon Brando.
Yeah, and that's just good writing. And that's the mythological beauty of the original. But anyways, I'm going to give you my thoughts quickly. First thoughts on Man of Steel. I do love the physicality of this movie. You finally do get to see Superman in action. And I agree with you guys that I do like the fact that Lois Lane knows who he is to begin with. What I don't like, though, is the fact that she's calling him Clark in front of everybody. You're talking about the police, the military. So okay. So that's something that's not going to ruin a movie. But then the whole world knows now.
She's out of earshot.
No,
she's out of earshot. That's what I thought too.
No. She's not out of earshot. But then now you have the aliens going to the Kent farm. The aliens going to Smallville. She tracked it down way too easily to get to Pete Ross, like from all these other odd jobs to get back to Pete Ross. It's a little too coincidental, a little too easy, and I am going to have a hard time believing the whole world will not know he's Superman in the next movie. And this kind of goes from where I'm going to lead into the conversation here, is I don't like this movie on its own. To me, this movie, and I think I told you that, Jeff, when we saw this on opening night or opening weekend, is I need to see where we're going to go with this movie for me to really judge, is this movie any good or is it terrible? And I'm scared of where it's going, but that's a separate discussion. There's just not a lot here for me to enjoy in terms of who Superman is. I mean, I don't really enjoy his emo trip. I mean, I get that they want to do something different, and I appreciate that. It just doesn't work. I'm bored, and it's not exciting, and it's not mythic enough for me to really get attached to. I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about or understand that aspect. I do like the different take with Jonathan Kent.
I think I do understand where you're coming from, because really all they're actually exploring is the fact that he's kind of an outcast and really just more exploring his powers, it feels like, and the reaction to other people to him. We're not really exploring what the idea of Superman is. And I absolutely agree that the movie is entirely lacking in that. We don't explore the idea of Superman. We're just kind of, getting the 2-hour pilot for future movies, right? That's what we're having. I mean, but okay, well, no, I'm cutting you off.
Okay, so there's another couple things that I want to mention that I find interesting on this. And again, it's a different take, so I appreciate it, but I don't know if I necessarily like. Jor-El is not really talking about him initially being a leader. His initial thoughts are he's going to be a god to them. Then this information, this stuff, storyline, which I don't like about the Codex. Instead of him inspiring humanity, is it his goal to really send the Codex there and naturally breed with humans so he can just really pass on Kryptonian DNA and then they'll become a hybrid race? Is that kind of the point here?
I kind of wondered that too. And I remember really only notice it watching it for this podcast. So I usually just fast forward all over that kind of stuff because it is a little boring. But I kind of wondered at one point, like, what was the whole point of sending the Codex? Because then later on, it seemed to be, and this was a real problem, I thought, it seemed to be important to Jor-El later in the movie.
Jor-El wanted to preserve the Kryptonian heritage in the race, but he didn't want to do it at the expense of humanity like...
True, but he also said the Kryptonians had their time. He's a product of their failures. Well, so if Superman is a natural birth... Okay, I get it. Fine, something different. You send him, and if he's naturally breeding with humans, this new Superman, that's how they're going to pass their DNA through natural means. I don't understand this Codex thing, and it seemed like a just sloppy storytelling, and it also seemed weird from Jor-El. Like he's not really talking about him inspiring him. He's saying, okay, yeah, you can save him. Or you can save her as Lois is crashing, and he's going to be a god to them. And it almost seems like in his discussions with Zod, it's all about becoming a hybrid race. And then I also have other problems here, too. Like, Superman's first appearance to the world is like, don't play games with me, General. Instead of, who are you? A friend. These are the drastic contrasts here. Yeah, it's being done on purpose, but there's the question. Is that worthy of Superman? I guess the story is maybe he doesn't know who he is yet, and that's why I say it's really going to depend on where the story is going to go from here. But I can only look at it from what I've seen so far.
I think you're right about his introduction to the human race. There was a bit of a disappointment. He was just floating over Area 51 or wherever they are in the middle of the desert. And we've definitely lost, the awe and the wonder of, his introduction to the world in Superman, and to an extent, Superman Returns as well. So I think you're right on there. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of agree. And it's a little annoying to see that particular introduction. Like, again, this kind of goes to what I think is very odd about the movie, how Zack Snyder wanted to distance this movie from the Christopher Reeve movies. And this is probably one of those things, because I believe he wanted to kind of play up the fear that people have of Superman as opposed to the awe. And maybe that's just more of a sign of the times. People are maybe a little more cynical now than they were in 79, I guess. Yeah, like at times, they're ripping stuff off from the original movies, and then they just do a complete 180 with Superman floating there in the middle of the desert and being taken away in handcuffs, very, very odd choices. It's probably just to do, to distance themselves, but they probably could have found a better way to do this.
It is. It's hard because you have to do something different. Otherwise, you're repeating the same mistakes that Superman Returns made. But I just still think that, again, what's the spirit of this character? Who do we need him to be? I appreciate the story. I like the fact that he's uncertain and there's a little bit of fear. And that's an interesting question. The question is the world ready? I wish they kind of maybe had a discussion and said maybe a discussion between Lois and Clark, or even between program Jor-El and Kal-El. Am I ready to be the world's savior? You know what I mean? Because of what Jonathan did to him. And then going back to the child abuse as I was talking about.
Oh, wow.
No, I'm just kidding with that. I mean, I do appreciate the Jonathan Kent character here a little bit. Before we, summarize our thoughts on Man of Steel as well.
Well, but Harry, you forgot about the ending, though.
Yeah, I know.
Kills Zod. I mean,
yes.
Let's hear you rage on that. I need to know where you sit with this.
And surprisingly, I'm not completely against it. I realize he's doing that to save somebody. My cousin pointed out to me very clearly that Zod, and it's true, Zod said there's only one way this is going to end, with either one of them dying. So, I mean, Superman really has no choice. What I don't buy is the emotional outburst cry afterwards. Now, again, I hate to keep comparing back to Superman the movie. You compare that emotional outburst when he realizes that he saved everybody but Lois. I bought that scream and that cry to the heavens, and I didn't buy this one. And I remember I told Geoff that upon the initial release as well. I didn't buy it at all. It just seemed forced.
I 100% agree. It doesn't have nearly that resonance that scream at the end of the original Superman has. My bigger problem with him killing Zod is that, I always feel that the character of Superman will always find another way, right? I mean, that's kind of, how a lot of superheroes are, especially with DC, that they can always find an alternative. Mm-hmm. And I found it was the most disappointing thing in this movie that they not have found another way for him to stop Zod without killing him. Now, obviously, they kind of wrote him into that corner so that he had no choice. But, they could maybe come up with something a bit different. But I really feel they missed the mark. And again, I think that this goes the whole thing where they probably thought that, oh, no one would believe that we would go that far. And then they do. And it's supposed to be shocking. But really, I feel it's more disappointing than it is shocking.
Yeah, and I agree. My disappointment with Superman not finding another way, it's not really about Zod, the snapping his neck, even though I think that was a bit gruesome I think they could have found a less direct and harsh way of Superman dealing with
his head right off.
Yeah.
Just like Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, fight, finish him. I can tell you, I pretty much had that thought in my head. Just finish him. But the reason why is because I was getting bored of, and this is going back to where action movies or superhero movies are today. The last fight I like the Smallville fight, and that was almost enough for me. I didn't like any of the other additional fighting that happened in this movie. The Metropolis fight, the Zod fight, I felt that it was too much, and it went on for far too long. A lot of people call it destruction porn now. I just call it, showing off. It's just like, it's the same thing in Avengers. After 5 minutes of seeing these superheroes get together and it's cool, I'm done, but it goes on for another 25 minutes. A CGI fest, which is just boring. It gets dull. And it doesn't help that it's all CGI and not real. So what are your thoughts on that? I think we should just lightly touch on that quickly here. That's why I was saying I was kind of ready for this to be over at this point. What did you guys think of the ending here, even the whole battle?
I agree. It just got boring after a while. I mean, it was too much, for sure. I didn't care about them fighting through the streets of Metropolis there. And I don't know. I don't have a problem with, all the CG action and the destruction porn, if you will, but it doesn't have any emotional significance. If it did, if they found some way to make it relevant, then, then sure, they could do all that destruction porn as much as they wanted to. I think it'd be fine. But you're right. After a couple minutes, it's kind of meh. Just end it. Just end it. You guys are talking about him ending Zod in the subway station there.
Junk it!
Junk it! You miserable cuss!
You'll have to listen to the previous podcast to get that one, Nathan.
But, yeah, I don't know. They did what they had to do, I think. Obviously they're opening after Avengers, so, they feel they got to make a big splash in a metropolitan area. They could have trimmed that down a little bit. As far as him eliminating Zod, you guys have talked about a superhero. He would find another way. Superman would find another way, and they kind of wrote him into a corner there where they wanted to do that because they wanted to go where we thought they wouldn't. But we've never really explored why these guys, Superman or it's Batman or whoever, won't kill. They won't eliminate this huge threat to what they hold dear, right? And I thought that this was an interesting choice. This is why he won't kill, because he did it. And after he did it, he realizes that, even though he needed to do it, killing's not the answer, right? He basically eliminated his entire race at this point, right? Mm-hmm. That was the choice that he made. Again, we go back to the hero's choice. It's Sophie's choice. It's two bad choices, and he has to make a decision. And so he decides to sacrifice his own morality for the greater good. And I thought that was really interesting that they did that. I hope that they pick up that thread going forward. I'm not sure that they're going to, but we'll see. So there you go.
My views on Man of Steel may change depending on where it would go. Why don't you just give me your final thoughts? Do you recommend Man of Steel, Jeff?
I do recommend Man of Steel. I think there's enough going on here that, for the character, there's some things here that we see in Man of Steel that we haven't seen in previous movies. And while Henry Cavill doesn't have the earnestness of Christopher Reeve, he brings other things to the role. I think are interesting. The physicality, I think, is good. It's a sort of a different view. We don't get the bumbling Clark Kent. We don't get the bullshit Lois Lane. Oh, who's, this doesn't know who he is. So I think that's pretty cool. It's big. It's bombastic. Hits you over the head a little bit. But yeah, it's a recommendation for me.
Yeah, I really enjoy Man of Steel, but I mean, I enjoy it more as a sci-fi action film. As a Superman fan, I do like it, but if I were to recommend someone who wants to get to know Superman, I would say go back, watch the originals. I think it's a really fun movie for me.
Fun is a strong word. I would say, yeah, in terms of the action, Superman fans were waiting because of some of the way the stories were told in the original ones and the technological limitations of the time. They finally got what they were clamoring for, is a lot of punching and a lot of destruction. They got that in this one. I enjoyed some of it, as I mentioned. But yeah, I'm not digging the character of Superman so far. I like the fact that there are a couple of interesting takes, like with Jonathan Kent. I just wish they explored that a little bit more with Kal-El himself. More in the sense that, is the world ready, but then is he ready? And I really didn't get that. They just kind of said, as soon as he found out, oh, my daddy's giving me a suit, okay, I'm gonna go, but why? Because it's not about inspiring the people. I'm confused on the message. And for me, that's why this is a meh. It's right on the line of, I don't know if I like it, and I don't know if I don't like it. Because there is stuff to like here, but there's not enough to like here for me. It's really hard for me to lean one way or the other. It's not a terrible movie. It's not a great movie. And hopefully it will improve in the sequels. Now, how about we just have maybe a short discussion on where the franchise is headed? So obviously we're getting Batman versus Superman coming up in several months here. Are you looking forward to that? And how do you feel that as a sequel? Because technically it's a sequel to Man of Steel.
They say it isn't a sequel, though. Even though there are no plans for a Man of Steel 2 officially, the official word is that this is not a true sequel. And as far as where we're going to go with the franchise in general, I'm actually kind of worried. I'll be honest with you, even though I just said I really like Man of Steel, and I am looking forward to Batman vs. Superman. But from what I've read recently, some of the rumors are that the studio loves Batfleck so much that they're almost going to make him the centerpiece now.
Did you by chance hear today's news? That was yesterday's news. Today's news was that what you're saying is confirmed by Zack Snyder 100%.
Oh, okay, well, there you go. Yeah, the reshoots, they're going to go back to add, we have to explain Batman more. Because, I guess people don't know who Batman is. So we should put in a couple more scenes. Yeah, I was really looking forward to the idea that Superman would be the linchpin. And in my mind, he kind of is to the DC universe, not just the cinematic universe, but in the comic book world. You kind of have the holy trinity of Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, but Superman is sort of the figurehead there. And if they're just kind of, going with the safe route of Batman, I'm a little disappointed if that's going to be the case.
How about you, Jeff?
Well, I don't know. There's a lot of questions there. I mean, so just talking about the news there, where the studio wanted more Batman, and like you were saying today, where that's absolutely the case. But Zack Snyder had a good point. Is Superman had the whole movie. We're just introducing Batman. So at the start, we got more Batman at the start because we had to introduce his character in this context, in this universe. And then as the film goes on, it kind of evens out. So if that is the case, and it's not just sort of a canned answer, I can live with that for sure. I thought it was interesting. Right before we started recording today, I watched the trailer again for Batman v Superman. And I noticed that Superman does not have any lines in that trailer at all. So, it's interesting. So go back and watch it. He didn't talk at all.
Not even
He's
Otis?
got No, he's got nothing. He's got a furrowed brow a little bit there. So, I think the studio was not as impressed with the box office performance there. So I'm a little concerned there because I agree. I think Superman should be the linchpin of the DC cinematic universe. But all that being said, I am excited as to where everything is going here. I mean, because we haven't seen this before. A couple other things, since we're talking about news that broke today, Zack Snyder had a good point. Like, Batman and Superman transcend the genre, right? These guys are mythology now. It doesn't matter what's going on out there. If the superhero genre fails or succeeds, what kind of movies are popular? These two characters,
they'll be around
matter
forever.
What's going on. So they'll be around forever and they'll be relevant forever. So we can move forward with these guys, and I'm excited that we get to see them interacting together. We haven't seen this yet on this big screen. And if it's a colossal fuck up, it's okay. I'll go back and watch the other movies, which are awesome. That's fine. So I'm optimistic because there's no downside. It sucks. Yeah, fuck it. We'll go back and I'll watch Superman and I'll watch Batman Begins. That's fine. That's okay. I do hope that we get a true sequel to Man of Steel after Batman v Superman. I want to see what happens next with just this character out of the Justice League and all of those other guys. And I think that, Henry Cavill's maybe not the best representation we've seen of the character. He's still a good representation of the character, and I like a lot of the things he brings to the role. I think there's a ton of potential here. And, I don't think Zack Snyder's a genius, but he has style. He gives a shit. He has reverence for the source material, but he's not a slave to it like Bryan Singer was. So I think we've got a lot of cool stuff to look forward to.
Yeah, I'll chime in with my thoughts here. Yeah, I am looking forward. I'm not going to be a douche and lie and say I'm not looking forward to Batman versus Superman. Of course. Who isn't? You want to see something along those lines that we've seen in the comics actually on film. The issue I have here is they're going to address a main story point from Man of Steel in this Justice League kickoff, whereas about the destruction of Metropolis and the impact of having this superpowered being here. Should he be here? Is he a worthy superhero? Is he our protector? I don't know if you're really going to get a proper answer and a proper analysis of that question in Batman versus Superman. I know that's what's going to kick off Batman wanting to fight Superman. Of course, it's obvious. It's shown in the trailers. I guess he was there when the destruction was happening, and it looks like he's retired, and that gets him out of retirement. I'd rather have that explored in a direct sequel with Superman by himself, whether he's dealing with the military or dealing with Lex Luthor. I don't need to see Batman there. I also agree that I want Superman to be the leader and the linchpin of Justice League. Superman is the leader. He is the superhero. The problem with the world today is that he's not the most popular superhero. And that's an issue with Hollywood. That's an issue with our society. And that's very disturbing to me as an individual and a human being on this planet, especially when it's quite clear that there are Superman stories that can be told if given a proper chance. That's just my opinion. I am worried. I don't buy the fight to begin with anyways as well, even though I kind of want to see it. Superman should be able to clean this guy's clock within a millisecond. But anyways, I'll give it a go. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the Dark Knight Returns storyline there, even though there's a kryptonite arrow. I don't give a fuck. If Superman wanted to kill this guy or stop him, it'd be done.
But he doesn't want to kill him.
Doesn't matter. Then you gotta wrap him up in some Wonder Woman lasso or some bend some steel so he can't get out of it. It's stupid. Sorry, I don't buy it.
We can do a retrospective after the film comes out.
I don't buy it, even if there's kryptonite involved. Don't buy it. Anyways, but it'll still be fun.
I would love to do a retrospective after the movie comes out, but first we would have to listen to this podcast and all the comments, and then I think you kind of echoed a lot of things I said there, Harry. I mean, I'm probably a little bit more optimistic than you. I think I'll most likely enjoy Batman versus Superman just on a pure spectacle level. And I mean, I think maybe I give Zack Snyder a little more credit. I think he is a good director. I don't think he's a good writer. And I think some of the problems I had with, Man of Steel come directly from also who wrote it, which was, a lot of David S. Goyer, who, I don't really think is a very good writer, even though he wrote the Christopher Nolan movies. But I think Nolan takes the scripts and reworks them a bit, and Snyder probably doesn't, or adds his own stuff to it. But anyway, I think they got a lot of potential, and it could very well be that this whole fight it's nothing. It could be the first half hour of the movie, for all we know. Maybe the rest of it will just be them fighting Lex Luthor's terrible wig.
I'd love for them to just actually, fight for 5 minutes, and then they just go to a coffee shop or go to the shawarma place at the end.
The shawarma place, yeah.
Just like in Avengers, and we deal with them just like staring at each other or telling dirty jokes. That'd be great. That'd be refreshing.
I'd watch that.
And at the end, Superman has him, takes him into space on his back, and they both smile and wink to the camera. That'd be perfect.
They do the slow motion,
they're holding hands
up and freeze frame at the end.
Oh no! But then they go into space. They do that, but then they have to fall back to the Earth, just like Point Break.
Oh yeah,
and just redo that whole scene from Point Break.
Yeah, that'd be great. Okay, so guys, we're long in the tooth here for this one. It's been fun, but we should probably wrap it up. How about just a quick thought for a fun ranking of all the films, the 4 Chris Reeve films, Superman Returns, Man of Steel. Jeff, shoot first. Can you do a ranking in your head here and tell us what it is? Best to worst, or worst to best, whatever you want.
I'm going to go worst to best here. I wrote them down. At number 6, Superman the movie with Christopher Reeve, just a terrible, awful. No, I think we're probably in agreement here. The worst, Superman 4 Quest for Peace, is a bag of shit. Nuclear Man's okay. Anyway, number 5, Superman 3. Got a couple moments that are okay, but not a lot to redeem it here. Then Superman 2 for me.
Wow, that low.
Well, you know what? The 6, Superman 4 and Superman 3 are way down there, and everything else is pretty close. But Superman 2, really solid. Lots of great moments in this movie, but it does have trouble lasting to today. It doesn't age quite so well. Man of Steel is next on the list. For me, I really enjoy a lot of elements here, and I'm excited for where it's going. And then, I'm just taking these, just so nobody crucifies me or eggs my house or hunts me down. Just these are my enjoyment factors in watching these movies recently here. Next up is Superman, the movie with Christopher Reeve. I don't think anybody can disagree that this is a great film. I have my problems with it. Going back in time probably is what bumped this down to my second favorite. I'm not saying this is my favorite forever, but just right now, off the top of my head, Superman Returns was
my goodness,
my number 1. Yeah, I know. I'm going off the board here. But
you are. You'll find eggs at your house. Trust me.
Yeah, well, that's okay. For you and your stature, you can probably manage to throw eggs at the top of my basement window, so I'm not too worried about it. Quick piece on here. The reason why I chose Superman Returns right now is because I thought Bryan Singer took the most chances with the story he was trying to tell here. But there's some really interesting pieces. I love the direction. I love the cinematography. It misses in a lot of places. There's no question about it. But I thought it raised the most interesting questions about the character that nothing else did, and thought it was a goddamn shame that we didn't get to see more of this. So there you go.
Okay, sounds good. Nathan.
Okay, well, I'll go in the opposite direction, best to worst. So for me, I would say best is Superman the movie. Number 2 on my list would probably be Man of Steel. 3 would be Superman 2, and then Superman Returns, Superman 3, and Superman 4 Quest for Peace. I think Superman still is my number 1 Superman movie. It really captures the character. Despite the ending, I think the movie as a whole works. And, we never really touched on anything regarding cinematography. And, Jeff, you just brought it up now. First movie has
amazing,
great cinematography.
Jeffrey Unsworth.
One thing, because I was really looking for that when I was watching it for this podcast, and I really loved the shots of his early days in Smallville. I mean,
Yes.
those are some great wide shots on, well, I don't know if they shot in Kansas. It was probably Alberta.
No, it's Alberta.
Yeah, okay. Oh, I thought I recognized it. Okay.
It's my backyard, man.
You know, and, and well, that was you on the field there. Yeah, it's a movie that is very charming and very watchable, and I have so many warm feelings of growing up with this movie. It's just great.
Okay, yeah, I'll go in the reverse order. I mean, worst to best. Again, these are just my favorites as they stand today, not in terms of the best movies, just like Jeff did and you did, just the favorites. So Superman 4, I think we agree across the board, the worst. I like the message, but in what it could have been, just the budget just really hurt it, and it ended up just being terrible. You guys might be surprised at my next worst, Man of Steel.
Not surprised.
Not surprised. Not surprised.
Yeah, no, I guess not for me. This one will climb if they do sequels justice, because it heavily depends on what comes next. As a one-off, I find it really disappointing. It's not fun. It's not epic. It's a lot of action, but I got tired of that after 20 minutes. So I needed more there. Then Superman Returns. I like a couple of elements, as you mentioned, Jeff, of Superman Returns. I just wish they explored something more instead of just beat-by-beat replay of Superman the movie. The other even though I like Routh, I think, as you mentioned, Spacey just didn't find the right element of portraying Luthor, even though he had one or two okay moments. Kate Bosworth was terrible. There was no chemistry between her and Routh, in my opinion, and that was a big crux of the movie. Even though I like the spirit of the character, unfortunately they didn't do anything new too much, so that's why it's down there. Superman 3 is my next one. The reason why I say it's a little higher is at least I got something different to explore with Clark Kent in Smallville with Lana Lang. I love the duality between the evil Superman and the good Superman. I also find the movie funny and quotable, even though it's ridiculous. We talked about it, right? It's just I can pull out so many quotes from that movie, and this is my favorites list, so that's why it's up there. And then Superman 2, and then Superman the movie. Again, we talked about why is Superman, for me, the best movie. I just think it's the best superhero movie ever made yet still. It's just so epic, and it's simple in nature and tells a mythology story in that very classic Joseph Campbellian way that we saw with the original Star Wars as a comparison example. What I like about this as well, if people want to start saying, well, I want a gritty take on Superman. Well, guess what? He's not here fighting a superpowered villain. He's saving us from the evil, selfish greed and corruptibility that we as human beings are and have always been. He's there to inspire us to be better. That's what I want in a Superman movie. And I got it here, and that's why it's my favorite. I mean, then we're talking about the acting. Chris Reeve is still the best Superman yet. I think he's the best casting of any superhero character yet. We could talk about Wolverine or Batman or other Spider-Man or anything else, or Iron Man. I still think he's the best casting choice yet. I mean, I know that's argued by many people, but I also love Hackman. A lot of people don't like his hamminess, but I still think that there are elements there that make him truly evil. And as we talked about several times, the spirit of who Superman needs to be is defined perfectly here. In a world that really needs a hero to inspire us, I look no further to this guy. I don't want to see Batman leading the way. I don't want to follow that guy with a 10-foot pole. When I see Christopher Reeve, and it's a little cliche, but when I see him floating through space at the end of the movie, and he smiles and winks at the camera, breaking down that third barrier, to me, he's that protector. It's a feel-good moment. Makes me feel he's watching out for all of us. And I love it. And that's it.
All right.
That does it today, guys. Unless you guys have any other thoughts?
I had one final thought. I was thinking about this as I was watching the Christopher Reeve movies. I mean, you kind of touched on a bit, Harry. The influence of that movie, even just the first one, I think has really resonated through all of Superman to follow. Everything from like all the TV shows and even to the comic book. I think they probably changed the comic book slightly to fit, the Christopher Reeve version.
Yeah. It's even influenced Batman. Like Nolan took influence off of this.
Yeah.
To make Batman Begins.
Yeah.
I think I agree. I mean, I think we can agree that Christopher Reeve is, probably the quintessential version of the character here. But, what? Let's face it. I mean, what's great about the character is that we still get to experience different versions of this guy on the big screen in different mediums. And, even though Christopher Reeve is gone, God rest his soul, we get to see his influence still today and going forward to the future. I don't know about you guys, but I'm pumped to see what's next.
I'm excited to see what's next too. I just hope it's worthwhile and inspiring. That's what I want. I'm tired of these droopy superhero movies now. The world has just gone to shit, and it's just getting worse. If there's a perfect time for a nice, uplifting movie, and I think Iron Man, to an extent, shows that it can be done. I think Superman should be that guiding light, leading the charge for something like that. Batman can stay in the shadows. I want Superman to be in the light, not in the dark, if you understand what I mean.
I agree completely.
So that does it for today's episode 5, our discussion on Superman franchise. So, Jeff, I think it's my turn to pick what's next for episode 6. Are you ready?
Yeah, lay it on us, man.
It's not Superman 4, so don't worry about it.
Oh, my God.
No, I thought we'd go in a different direction, go back to our usual routine of looking at obscure movie. We did mention this in one of our previous podcasts. I thought we haven't really done a drama yet, so I thought it'd be a perfect time to visit Harrison Ford in the Mosquito Coast.
All right. Yeah, that's an interesting choice. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. That'll be fun.
So, Nathan, thank you for joining us. We hope to see you again soon.
Thanks for having me.
No problem, and hope you had fun.
Oh, I did. Learned a lot.
Yes, we all did. I learned that our 2-hour cap turned to 3 hours and 22 minutes, but that's okay. Yeah. All right. Take it easy, guys. Rest easy. I'll delete all of your comments. It'll just be me talking to myself for this podcast as I edit it down. All right, guys. Good night.
All right.
Cheers.
Good night.
He didn't die. I asked you to kill Superman, and you're telling me you couldn't even do that one simple thing.